Thank you for having me.
No problem. And hey everyone, Lash Luke here again with Party Jams and our very special guest, Shona and OG.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Right, so normally on Sundays, me and Party Jams, we like to talk about the weekly manga chapters that came out, but because unfortunately we've lost the big one for all of us, Doctor Stone, we thought might as well do a big full retrospective on the series, talking about it, what we loved about it, some of our highlights of the series, and what we could potentially see in the future for Doctor Stone, or lack thereof, depending on what Inagaki and Boichi want to do with it. So I think for us to get us started, we should talk about how we first got into Doctor Stone. So if anybody wants to go first, I'm more than happy to let them take the reins.
Okay. Well, before that, I just wanted to say for any of our regular viewers who might be there, so our weekly chapters we'll probably be doing that next week for as the next set of chapters are actually coming early on Friday. It looks like based on the Shonen Jump app. So we might just do like a double set of chapters the following week because otherwise we'd be doing like 3 streams or something this week. But yeah, for Doctor Stone, for me, it actually does go to the Shonen Jump app because when I first got it and was like, oh man, I can just pay $2 a month and just get all of Shonen Jump or at least good amount of it. That sounds great. And at first, I was just reading the animes I was watching, like My Hero Academia, for example, as well as some older series that I've always been meaning to read, like Claymore. But then eventually, I was like, okay, well, I'm starting to catch up with all these series and I need to read more. I'm already paying the subscription fee. So which of these manga would be good to read? And Dr. Stone caught my eye early on just from Boichi's artwork. But then when I heard there was an anime going to come out, I thought to myself, okay, well, let me read this series and see if the anime is going to be something that I would be interested in watching. And that was how I started. And then the first 2 chapters, honestly, the very ending of chapter 2, where Senku says, I'm going to beat fantasy with science, like that's what really hooked me to just read the series as a whole. Because just the very concept of dealing with something fantastical by using everyday real life science from someone who's in the STEM fields was very intriguing to me. And I just kept reading on since.
Okay, and OG, if you want to say how you got into Doctor Stone.
There we go. So I started it when the anime started because I wasn't really a big manga person at the time, but I saw they were promoting it a fair amount when season one came out. So I was like, okay, this looks interesting. And to be fair, there was a bit of a hype around it. Like people were like, oh, I've been waiting this for a while, or waiting for this for a while. So I checked it out, and episode one was amazing. I was like, this looks like it's going to be one of the best anime I've ever seen. Needless to say, I thought so through the first season. Loved it so much that as I started to get into manga, I read the Doctor Stone manga, caught up to it. I caught up right in the middle of the fight against Obara, and I was weekly since that point. Um, and then as far as like my content creation background, uh, I think I did. I think I did regular Doctor Stone content for like a full year. So that whole journey of like just casually watching it to like covering it regularly is pretty crazy to think about.
Okay, all right. And as for me, I was one of the people um, who I confess, I first started it on when it were when the scans dropped, when um, manga stream was still a thing before I eventually went to full weekly Shonen Jump app only with Doctor Stone. But it was one of the series that I caught for first day, and I thought, wow, this is something that really just from the first panel when you see the on that day everyone on Earth instantly turned to stone. Like I was immediately hooked with that, and was like, okay, where is the story? Where is the story going? What's going to happen? And in a sense, going to get a little bit personal here with Doctor Stone. This series, along with Promise Neverland and We Never Learn, were series that were running in the magazine when I was going through some really dark times in my life, to the point where I was on the verge of like having suicidal thoughts. Not to get into too big with it, but two people who were former my friends basically backstabbed me and felt like ending it all. And Doctor Stone, Promise Neverland, Me Never Learn kept me going because I wanted to keep seeing what was going to happen throughout all the chapters week to week. And they as corny as it says, as corny as it sounds, I feel like this series, along with those other two, really helped save my life and get me out of that dark, depressing stage. And I've never looked back after that. So really grateful, really grateful for that. And obviously, when Promised Neverland ended, I was looking for the next series that I wanted to talk about, and Doctor Stone was the one. And never looked back after that. So that's my introduction into Doctor Stone as a whole. And again, just love the characters, love the story, and all the scientific inventions. And also, we've got a few comments. So thanks for joining us, Hayes. You were at day one, Luke. Love to see. Yes, I was. Thank you for that. And yeah, I guess now we can talk about what really were our favorite moments in the series, because I know, OG, you did the top 5 fan voted Doctor Stone moments. So I'm interested to know, like, what would your list be different for those 5 moments now that the series is concluded?
Well, so yeah, like you said, that was the one I did. And also, let me know if I'm echoing, by the way.
No,
You're
The
you're
one
good.
I did. Huh? What was that?
You're
You're
not
good.
echoing.
Okay, good. The one I did for YouTube, that was fan voted. So put me on the spot a little bit, but let me see. My top 5 moments,
Well,
not
if you want, I
counting.
can.
Huh?
I was going to say, if you need a second, I could list some. I expected Luke to ask this question, so I've been prepping for this
Why
stream
don't you do
beforehand.
that? You go ahead, and then I will come up with at least 3.
All right, fair enough. So yeah, actually, I think going off that video is a good point. I don't have these as ranked as Luke usually does, because I know you have your 1 to 10. But one I did recommend for Shonen OG's video was the moment where Tsukasa and Kohaku and Hyoga all teamed up against the Americans. And it was a very short-lived moment, but I remember thinking how significant that was. And honestly, just that entire Battle of Araksha, as I like to call it, was because like everything accumulated to that point. And in many ways, I would argue that the peak of the series was the Battle of Araksha plus the resolution with the Suiko Lone Arc, which would be another one of my top favorite points of the story, because all the character development really accumulated there. We got to see characters move past previous conflict. We got to see their growth and how their new views on science and each other have changed since the series began. And not to mention, we got to see a lot of characters kind of come into their own as well. Like, for example, we got to see Hyoga self-sacrificing himself for a person he originally had tried to kill. And then meanwhile, we had Tsukasa, who went out of his way to destroy scientific civilization, like putting hope against hope that Senku science will come and save them. And then meanwhile, Senku, even in that arc, the petrification is what he's been fighting the entire time in the story. But for that arc, he was relying on another global petrification to save him and his friends. So it was really emotional time in the story. And I think it's probably one of my favorite things I'm looking forward to seeing animated, because, and it probably won't be till season 4 though, which will be years from now. And then also on my list of moments, I also really enjoyed the Nanami brother moments where we had Sai and Ryusui like come together. Their growth and development was very late in the story, but I think it was well worth it to have Sai join up, not just because we needed a mathematician and someone to help with computers, but also we got to see a new side to like a very fan favorite character. I do wish we got to see a little more Francois with their dynamics, but that's neither here nor there. And while we could have spent more time with the Nanami family, I did think what we got was really pleasant to see because their relationship felt very real, like two siblings who didn't get along, but not due to any sort of malice or over dramatic reasons, but so much as just they misunderstood each other. But now they came together, and the culmination was eventually Ryusuke going into space, partially and thanks to Sai's help with the calculations. So that was quite something. And I have a couple more, but I don't know if you want me to keep listing them, Luke, or if you want to drop a few yourself.
You can keep going.
Okay, well, if you're sure then. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm going to talk about a couple of the early moments then, because I've been rereading or trying to reread the series now that's done. And I think some of my early moments I really enjoyed were like the Suika getting glasses and seeing a sunflower for the first time. It was as someone with glasses, I can definitely tell you that once you have glasses, the world looks a lot different. And seeing how much such a simple thing, like in a world without technology, can be so helpful and beautiful, I think was a great demonstration of science's use early in the story. I also really enjoyed the first time we got to see Y-Man. And I'm talking both when we heard the why iconically, because that was shocking and surprising, to the actual reveal once we were on the moon and we found this cosmic core of science on the moon. Because, I mean, we all had our predictions, but it was a nice way to both match what we were thinking, but also it surprised us in a new way. And then, of course, I think like one of my top moments, probably, I don't know if I would call it one, but at least it's like top three, would be the series roadmap we got before the rocket launch, because that just showed every single invention that we've ever had and how it accumulated to this point. Because I think while the last arc, and maybe we'll talk about this more when we're talking about our favorite arcs, but the last arc, well, I do agree with most people that it was very rushed. It also felt very climactic to me because every chapter in that last arc gave us time to be like, okay, this is how we got to this point. This is all the things we did. And once we got to like the very end of the last, like the very last chapter of the 2021 was the very launch to the moon. And that felt very appropriate. So I do think that the arc, for as rushed as it was, did meet all the milestones that a good final arc should have. Even though, as I was ranking my arcs, it's probably one of my least favorite arcs in the story.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I suppose I'll give my top five Doctor Stone moments. So, top five, my fifth favorite moment is connected to the fan number one fan following moment. It's the moment where Senku's at Byakuya's grave after hearing the story of Byakuya and setting up the village on Treasure Island, and how it sort of like got to the mainland and just had these stories passed down through the generations. And you see Senku for the first time genuinely give off human emotions, because as OG put it in that video, that Senku has to accept at that moment that his dad's gone, and he never got a chance to say goodbye. And the fact that that affects Senku, someone who's not used to showing his emotions and just making him break down like that. That really hits you in the feels of just how much this means to Senku, and how he's going to take everything that Byakuya did for him and build up something incredible that I don't think even Byakuya, even if he was alive, would see coming himself. And also to go off on that point, my number four pick would be the death of Byakuya, the flashback in Treasure Island, where we saw just how much he sacrificed those years and years just to get the platinum, so that Senku had a chance to bring back everyone, bring back civilization. And then you just see him in the river looking up at the International Space Station, and then just the last words of him is Senku before dying. And yeah, that just hits, and it just shows again just how much of an impact Byakuya had on Senku, even though Senku's not one to actually showcase that all that much. But we can tell as the audience know exactly what Senku is thinking in those moments. And again, another favorite moment of mine is what you just said, Pie Jams. Suika seeing clearly for the first time. Yeah, you demonstrated it perfectly. I don't think I can add any more to that. And and also to top on to go off on that, my number two moment would be Suika just surviving in Brazil for not Brazil, in South America for all those years, and just basically doing doing what Senku did, and being one of the only people to actually do what Senku did the first time round, despite how young she is and how inexperienced she is, and just seeing that character development from her, going from someone who wanted to be useful to being basically the MVP of the entire series. And then when we see Suika all grown up, it's just her character at that point is probably complete. Even though we've still got a little bit of this series left, she at that point becomes one of the most fleshed out, well developed characters. And at that point, there's no her development is done. And then, of course, number one, it's the moment I voted for the most. We are going to the moon, simply just for the fact of the announcement of we are going to the moon. That's going to be the most shocking reveal in the series, and it's just like, how on earth are they going to get there? And I'm sure that hopefully at the end of series 3, if we get Treasure Island, the anime only fans are just going to be as shocked as well. I'm going to be like, oh my, we need to have series 4 just to see how they are actually going to get to that point. So yeah, those are my top 5 moments. I don't know if OG, if you've thought of any of the moments.
Yes, I did. So without like really coming up with like an official list, like just off the top of my head, in no particular order, Suika saving Senku, and like Suika saving Senku specifically because when she does that, for all the reasons you guys mentioned, but also she puts the cape on Senku, and it's like not just any cape, it's like an Ishigami village cape. And we see that Senku wears that for the entire rest of the story. So like he takes it seriously. Like anyone else would be like, "Oh, thanks, this is so cute," but like Senku took it seriously, and I just thought that was really cool. So that's one. Uh, Party Jams mentioned another one. The Kohaku Tsukasa Hyoga panel just radiates badass energy. Um, Senku freezing Tsukasa, one, because of how vulnerable we see Senku, and then afterwards, when he's like actually frozen there, and we see Mirai like crying, that gets me every time. One, two, three. Oh, what was the fourth one? I know the fifth one. Hold on. I forget my fourth one. Maybe it'll come to me. But my fifth
Okay.
one, outside where I'm gonna look at the reboot. Excuse me, is in the reboot when Shamil accuses Byakuya of like trying to take control of everybody, and he says, "I'm not trying to be the leader. I'm just trying to," and I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially says, "I'm just trying to uh, find the best move and like make it the right move." And I think that's just like perfectly representative of everything in Doctor Stone, and like Senku's approach to science is like he figures out like, okay, what should we do, and then he finds a way to make it work. So let me see, Suika. Um, what the heck was it? I can't remember. So those are my top 4. I'll give you 4.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So yeah, we all had, I think, laid the groundwork for pretty much the most iconic moments in the series. And I guess on that front, we should just I guess we could talk about what our favorite arcs were at this point, if that's all right with you guys.
That's fine with me because I was expecting that one too.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say that's
yeah,
very cool with me.
yeah. Okay,
Okay.
so I would say my favorite arc, and it's not just my favorite arc in Doctor Stone, but in manga and anime in general, it's got to be the Treasure Island arc. I know some people would put like the communications arc, like the War with Tsukasa arc, as their number one, but I feel like with Treasure Island, it just served as like the turning point of the series. And it was probably at that point, yeah, it was the halfway point of the series where you just where it was kind of like, okay, we know where we're going now. We're gonna go and find out what was the cause of the petrification, and then we find out like, oh, actually, there's this island, and it's not like a location that came completely out of nowhere because we had the whole flashback to where Byakuya and the astronauts landed on Treasure Island. So we kind of had it set up and built up since the flashback, and it was just kind of in the back burner of our minds for a while. And then when we actually get to that location, immediately just what hooked me on the arc was just seeing that panel of when Gen is looking through the telescope after the whole flash of light, and then you just see the image of Chrome, Ryusui, and everyone just petrified, and you're thinking like, oh my word, there's petrification rays on this island as well. And then we got introduced to all the inhabitants and find out the culture of the island and what the actual threat is in terms of Ibarra, which yes, Ibarra is the least interesting villain in Doctor Stone, but in terms of what he did for Treasure Island, he brought a new type of threat, made him which made him more intimidating. And I must say, those panels with him when Inagaki is trying to make not Inagaki, Boichi is trying to make him like the most threatening, terrifying thing ever. I feel like he really pulled that off and made it feel like you don't want to meet this guy in a dark alleyway. But I feel like the main reason why I like Treasure Island so much is just because I feel like it's the perfect length. Because I think we can all agree on this point that Doctor Stone is not the best when it comes to pacing. Some of the art, most of the arts are just a bit too short in some regard. But I feel like Treasure Island at like 38 chapters had like the perfect balance of like not too slow and not too fast, and then it just ended on a massive like what the hell kind of moments with the announcement of why man's on the moon, we're going to the moon, and it's just like, okay, this gets you really fired and pumped up, and that's what I love about it.
Okay, those are some pretty fair arguments. I'm really hoping that the anime the community will like really respond to the next season too, because even if the series is over, I feel like it hasn't quite hit peak popularity, and I think it'll either be like season 3 or season 4.
Yeah,
That being said, for mine, and I was debating it because for me, I always debate between the America arc and Stone Wars as like my favorite. And I decided to go with Stone Wars for a couple reasons. One, I think that the part 4 has some of like the highest highs of the series as a whole, which you guys just saw are perfect, are our favorite moments, and each of us had like a lot to say with like part 4 and like maybe one or two things with the early parts. So I think part 4 is like the strongest like highs, but it also has some of like the weakest lows as well. So it almost balances itself out. That and there's not really clear delineations for when arcs end because we were in America, then we ran to South America, and there was like a chase sequence in between. Then we had a huge fight, and Suika happened, then a slight amount of time afterwards. So it's a little more awkward in terms of story structure. You could argue that a lot of the pacing slash story structure issues started in part 4 and then kind of just continued on after that. But Stone Wars, in my opinion, I think it was like the most consistent in terms of Dr. Stone quality. Having doing some rereads right now, reading the early parts like the prologue, part 0, and part 1 of the story, especially if you're a manga reader, it's like very different in terms of art style. Like the characters just look so different early on when Boichi was still refining the art style. Slash, I think I mentioned this in a Shonen OG video when he was just changing the almost adapting the art styles as the series evolved. Kind of like we're watching the evolution of the manga while we're watching the evolution of human progress, which is pretty cool if you think about it that way. But I also feel like it's around the time when we finish up the first arc or part one, when Brewer gets the medicine, that the story like really gets started, because in part two, Stone Wars, we get like a real like defining conflict, a pressure that kind of pushes the series forward, unlike the more lax feelings of both the Age of Discovery and Ishigami Village arc, if you would like to call it that, because Tsukasa's threat is much more permeating the series at that time. We also get to introduce to so many cast members in part two that end up becoming huge central characters down the line, like Nikki and Ukyo and even Yo, arguably, and of course Tsukasa and Hyoga. Because comparatively, I think one of the weaknesses after part two is that the characters that follow us after Stone Wars don't get the proper fleshing out they kind of deserve. Because with Mozu and Kirasame, for example, when they joined up with us in part three, they really only got to do a few things, and then they just kind of stayed in the background. And the Americans, in my opinion, were kind of like got like the worst of it, because they were very interesting characters with great designs, but we really never got to dig into them at all. And I'm just not just talking about Stanley Soldiers, but also Carlos and Max and even Luna, and Chelsea, if you want to count her too. So all those characters really didn't get much time, but in the Stone Wars characters, like everyone, both from the Ishigami village that we got to meet in part one, and the characters that we recruited from Sukasa's army, we get to spend so much time with them, and they become a huge part of our central focus. That other than maybe Ryusui and I guess you can say Sai, we really don't get the kind of character development from the rest of the cast afterwards. And the other two reasons is Stone Wars had some of my favorite inventions of the series. It had the tank, it had the cell phone, it had dynamite, which I didn't include in my top moments, but it would probably be an honorable mention for me. Just the use of dynamite as a destructive tool of science that was also initially found for peace is a great way of showing that science is ultimately neutral. It's really how people use it that makes it what it is. And I think that's a good tone for Dr. Stone, especially when we go into future stuff with like Xeno in part four, that science can really take whatever the user wants of it. And I think the last thing I want to say with Stone Wars is, um, although Tsukasa is not my favorite antagonist series, he's still pretty close. I thought that his motivations were really good for a broad appeal antagonist. Because while Dr. Stone antagonists may not reach the heights of like Shigaraki from MHA or Mahito from Jujutsu Kaisen, Tsukasa is a villain that I think a lot of people can relate to. They can understand where he's coming from. So when you finally get to Stone Wars and you see the conflict of ideals, you are rooting for Senku to bring back science because of everything we've seen in part one what science could do. But you also get still little tidbits from Tsukasa that see why he's doing what he's doing as well. But it ends, of course, I think, with one of my really good fights with Tsukasa and Senku teaming up against Hyoga. And then, as Shonen Oji said, like the freezer moment with Tsukasa to cap off the arc is definitely a highlight of the series as a whole. And so I think everything from start to finish in Stone Wars is just perfect. And I think that's one thing that a lot of the other arcs don't have. I usually have some more issues with the other arcs, from like either the Stanley chasing in part four, or the building of the cities, or even like the rushed feeling of like the final part. And of course, the early parts is just kind of more, are still pretty solid, but they kind of do drag a little bit. But Stone Wars, I think, had the perfect length, perfect pacing, and the best inventions. And I think it ultimately accumulates a lot of what the best of Dr. Stone has to offer until we get to part four.
Okay, yeah, that I would, yeah, I can see why you would think that, and yeah, that's one thing I will give you credit for, that the the Stone Wars had much more interactions between the cast overall. So yeah, I'll give you to that. So I guess OG, if you want to say what your favorite arc is.
So first of all, two things. One, apparently my dad just bought a new printer, so if you hear loud banging noises in the back, that's why. Second of all, I remembered the fourth moment, which is And it's very easy to forget, but it's one of the most important moments in the series, period. It is after the poker game when Ukyo approaches Gen and he says, "Oh, so you let Senku win?" And Ukyo says, "Oh, you let Senku win?" And Gen goes, "No, I genuinely gave it 110% and I still lost." And he feels frustrated. That is one of Gen's best moments because it perfectly, first of all, defines his character and shows like one of his most genuine moments. And second of all, it's like the best look into his dynamic with Senku. So that was my number four, and I would be irate if I did not share that moment. But to the other question of arcs, we have some very, very good answers so far. Love Treasure Island. It would definitely Treasure Island and Stone Wars are both up there for me. But in all honesty, I don't think they touch South America simply because it has some of the best peaks in Doctor Stone. It's probably the most tense arc in all of Doctor Stone. Like, I remember reading it thinking it was like an HBO special where everyone just died left and right. And I was like, wow, people are dying. Like, they're not like, oh no, they got frozen in stone, but they're going to come back 20 chapters from now. Like, no, they're dying. Like, obviously, they didn't really die, but in the moment, it was like, they're dying. Um, you had some of the best character growth. You had Sukasa admitting that science was the answer to like saving the world, basically. Um, you had Kohaku, where she basically admits that she's like open to trusting people and like not just relying on her own strength. You have Kaseki's epiphany when Joel realizes, or when Joel uses the information from Kaseki, and Kaseki realizes that science transcends time. Um, it's just an amazing arc. It's like the most vulnerable arc. It's the most intense arc. And then, of course, um, you have the moment Suika, which is, if not number one, probably my number two favorite moment in the whole series. So I think I have to give it to South America.
Okay, yeah, yeah. If I was going to pick, South America would probably be my second favorite, for all the reasons that you said, and I just want to look at some of these comments for a second. You're very relatable, fam. Hey, Hunter X Hunter saved me in certain ways. Oh, glad to hear that, Hayes. Suika Survivor might be my number one. Yeah, I think I'm honestly shocked that the fourth popularity poll happened when it did, because if that had happened after the Suika time skip, Suika would have probably been easily in the top five characters for that popularity poll.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna say the same when we went into our favorite characters, I assume later. But yeah,
yeah,
I would agree with
I
that.
think I think we'll cover that next, like our favorite characters and our favorite and probably our favorite moments with them as well. Um, so yeah, Hayes, damn, Stone Wars might actually be my favorite arc too. South America had me on the edge of my seat week to week. Okay, so I think Hayes, you're under the pretense that Stone Wars is your favorite, followed by South America. Not
Yeah,
bad
I'm of the
choices.
same mindset, honestly, hey. So I'm glad we're in agreement there. Because I
Yeah,
will say another thing with South America is I in the controlled chaos, which is where me and Luke usually hang out. In the controlled chaos streams, they did talk about how they weren't sure about like the deaths being quote unquote fake outs because the characters didn't actually die. But I would argue that, and I thought about mentioning some of my favorite moments, but I was debating whether or not it counted. But I think that Senku and Tsukasa's discussion of figuring out, oh my God, we're like immortal with this Dr. Stone petrification was a pretty big thing. So even though the characters came back, like Shonen OG was saying, they did die. They just defied death, which is almost a more horrifying thing in a series that's been super grounded in reality. Like just the defying of death, and of course the importance of that as we get to the very end of the series. So I think, yeah, for all those reasons, South America would be my second favorite. I think the only thing that really holds it back is just I don't know where I would put the starting line for that because it took a while to get to South America as well. And honestly, everything right before South America was a bit of a slog. But
Yeah,
once we got there, it was nonstop amazingness.
yeah,
Oh,
I would.
Evie.
Yeah, Evie, thank you for joining us. Treasure Island's Peak. I agree. I agree with that, and I can't wait for the anime fans to see that in season 3. But yeah, I would say the start of South America was when they actually announced like this is where we're going.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to count that, then I would still kind of have to put it a bit lower just because the Stanley chasing stuff is kind of hit or miss for me personally. But I do understand why Shonoji put it up because if you start it once Stanley makes touchdown, then it's like perfection, like all the way through.
Yeah.
And then Evie says Treasure Island doesn't have a single bad chapter. I'm out. Constantly moving, evolved many characters and pushed the Y Man mystery more. Yeah, it does do a lot of that. I think it. I've heard other people having issues with certain chapters, and I will admit, when I was reading it, maybe it's because I caught up to it week to week. I think just like you guys, by that point in the story, so it was a little bit slower for me after having just read through like the Stone Wars, which is still like my favorite arc. So I think that may have affected me, but I think the anime will do a really good job with it.
Yeah, I agree. Also, Ibarra is the only real villain. Lol. Well, it depends. It depends. Like if you're looking at like villains that are pure, like just pure, unabashed evil, no redeeming qualities about them, then yeah, Ibarra is the only real villain in Doctor Stone. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would agree with that. Although, unless Magma and Hyoga were pretty bad themselves.
Well, Magma did get his redeeming moment, which, by the way, that was actually my if we're doing top 10, that is my number 10 moment when Magma uses the calculator and he actually realizes like, oh, this is what a computer does, this is what science is capable of. That was my number 10 moment in the series.
Yeah, I do remember seeing that, and I think it's a good moment. I love the computer invention. And then Evie, everyone else either joins the team or turns good. Ibarra was a villain at the start and the end. And you're right. But also, I feel like in a weird way, because of that, Ibarra is like the one villain that almost doesn't fit in with the rest of the series. So that always kind of
Yeah,
like, I mean, I do rank him above a lot of the other more minor antagonists, but of the major antagonists, he's probably one of my least favorites.
yeah.
But that's just me. I like complex villains. That's just kind of my taste.
Yeah, and Ibarra as a villain is not complex. He is not that complex.
No, and he didn't really need to be. I think Shonen Oji explained it well in his own video that for Treasure Island, they wanted like a pure evil villain to like oppose Senku because they didn't really need it, but because they had it, it added tension to the story, which was really good.
Yeah. So I guess on that front, we can move on since we're talking about the characters themselves. We might as well move on to talking about our favorite characters. I guess we should just stick with what we're going with our top 5 characters because unlike our top moments, I feel like we've all got our favorite characters.
Yeah, but this is also something I was ranking. But yeah, I might list of maybe like an honorable mention or two, just because there's so many good characters. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah,
So you can go first, Luke.
yeah, and this is one of the beauty of Doctor Stone. It's that I argue that despite not getting the attention that they deserve, there's no bad character in Doctor Stone. Like, period. Like, even if they're like unabashedly pure evil, like Ibarra, there's still good characters in general in the story because they work for what they're created to do. There's like no character who's created just to be there. They all have a purpose in the story, which is something that I don't think a lot of mangaka can actually pull off, making each character memorable in their own way, even if they're not a character that you don't really focus on. Like, for example, Mantle, even though you don't focus on him all that much, you still remember him. It's like, oh yeah, he's the little Weasley guy who's the henchman to Magma. So that's some praise you gotta give to Boichi and Inagaki. And I feel like my to start off my top 5 characters, I would go with Kasaki for the simple reason of you just don't. Yeah, it's something that you do expect because he's that old badass muscular guy who's like, yeah, I'm the veteran. I'm the veteran. I've done all of this. I've built all of this for the past 50 years. But what makes him such a good character is just how enthusiastic he gets. It's like, to him, science and crafting and building, he's like a kid in a candy store. And whenever Senku comes up with a new idea, it gets him really excited. And it's just hilarious all the time to see him just do his go Super Saiyan when he's like, "Oh, great! You don't think I could do this? Well, I'm gonna do it anyway." And I feel like my favorite moment with him that just perfectly sums up his character in general is a moment that when you look back on it, you think like, oh yeah, that really does hit you in the feels. It's where Kazuki is just thinking back on his life, how he didn't have many friends or anything like that. And then when Senku and Chrome came into the picture, he was like, oh, but you're you're nearly 50 years younger than me. And then Chrome's like, why does that matter? We're science buddies. And then you just see his eyes swelling up, and then he says to Senku, can I have the high five like he did with Chrome? And then he's like, yeah, you're my science buddy. So that's my favorite moment with Kazuki. And also the moments of just like with Joel and him. And when we finally got to that moment where they could actually toast together, I felt like, yes, that's a moment I've been waiting for ever since Joel came into the series. So yeah, that Kazuki would be one of them. Kohaku, obviously, because where is Dr. Stone without Kohaku? She's just an incredible female lead to the series. Even though, like Taiju, she's not the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to science. But that's what makes her wholly unique between with the main cast. It's like you've got Chrome and Senku talking about all this science stuff, and then Kohaku's just there like, oh, it's just dumb rocks. But again, this all comes full circle in the end when she's realizing the power of science and how much it means to both Senku and Chrome. But I feel like my favorite moment with Kohaku is again back on Treasure Island when she sacrifices herself to save Ginru, and then they see the Medusa device, and she's like, "Oh, it is science. We can figure this out." So that was probably my favorite moment with Kohaku. And then, of course, one of my other favorite characters, the main man himself, Senku. Not only one of my favorite characters, but my all-time what became my all-time favorite protagonist, because Senku as a protagonist wasn't a protagonist because he was the chosen one in a sense. He was a protagonist because he brought the whole cast together through his stern will and determination, and he's so unique as a protagonist in the sense that he's not out to be like, I'm the hero of the series, therefore I should be respected. He's just a very neutral guy who just wants to bring science back to the world and bring everything back to the way it was. And the moment that solidified Senku for me as a protagonist and why he's my number one is the moment in South America where he's asking everyone to make diamond batteries, and they're like, we can't do this. It's impossible for us. And the line that he says is, science doesn't belong to the masses. Whether you're good or evil, science belongs to everyone. And that moment there just solidified Senku as like, yes, he is the guy that if I would want a leader of the world, it would be Senku. And then my other two favorite characters are Chrome and Suika. Chrome, just because, again, like Kazuki, he's a kid in a candy store when it comes to science, and he even though he becomes a student under Senku, kind of like Suika, you get the feeling throughout the series that there's going to be a moment when he's going to surpass Senku. And even though we didn't really get that from Chrome, in the sense of surpassing Senku, of coming up with an invention that even he didn't think of. He did come very, very close, and the perfect example for this is the two-way rocket, because even though Senku had the initial idea of like, oh yeah, this might actually be a thing, he essentially dismissed it, and it was with Chrome's determination and enthusiasm that no, we are going to do this. And sure enough, everybody was like, yeah, we need to do this. We're not going to sacrifice ourselves on the moon. And I just love that about Chrome, because he's one of those characters who, unlike Senku, can actually think outside the box in certain situations. But of course, my number one favorite character, Suika, for what I mentioned before with her, the fact that she went from a little girl who could barely do anything to being one of the smartest people in Ishigami Village, standing right alongside Chrome, Senku, Kazuki, and Sinu, and even the fact that Sinu even praised her for some of the things that she did when she was alone in South America after everyone was brought back to the world. And again, all culminates in the end of the series where we see her alongside everyone, part of the science team as Dr. Suika. So yeah, those are my top 5 favorite characters, and I will let you guys take the reins now.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll use mine to transition with actually Evie's comment, because they said, I agree, though I wish Zeno kept his ideals of wanting to be a dictator rather than turning good. We didn't have time for that. And I will admit that is a good point. I feel like a lot of Zeno's philosophy should have been highlighted more, because we did get that time with Tsukasa and to some extent even Hyoga on Treasure Island. But Zeno, we didn't spend enough time for like his reformation, so to speak. But having said that, I will give my number 5 as Zeno, my favorite antagonist of the series. Now, I personally, and I've told Luke this in previous streams, I personally count Xena and Stanley together as a unit in terms of being a villain, but either whether you count them separately or alone, Xeno is a great antagonist. I think the reason I like him the most is because, number one, this was an antagonist that gave us a little bit more backstory with Senku. Like the most we got from Senku before then was that, oh yeah, he wanted to go to space and he loved science. And then we got his dad, who was awesome. But like basically it was just like my dad was an astronaut and he helped get me what I needed to go to space, or to be a scientist who will eventually go to space. But with Xeno, we got a whole new angle at what he did in order to become a scientist. And additionally, we got a personal connection between the protagonist and antagonist, which I always love to see. And plus, of course, acts as a fun foil against Senku. But besides his relationship with Senku, just what Zeno represents in himself is pretty amazing. Zeno's a scientist who's like extremely frustrated with both his role in the government being controlled by bureaucracy and just being at the mercy of the masses of people. And of course, they play this to an extreme, just like they did with Tsukasa, to show he's obviously the bad guy here. But to a lesser extent, you can kind of see that in today's day and age, science is something that's very misconstrued and almost just ignored, like flat out. So it's understandable that a scientist because Dr. Stone in the beginning takes place in our modern day, a scientist in his position would be very frustrated seeing the world as it is. So the fact that he wanted to ultimately create a new world where he could take charge and have people compete for the sake of intellect for charge kind of made sense to me. And the addition to that is I felt like, unlike Tsukasa, his felt very idealistic in terms of I want a world that's more pure without this corruption of the older generations. Xenos felt more realistic, where he's like, okay, I'm going to use military power to seize my rule and focus on industrialization. And for all intents and purposes, in a realistic setting, he would have probably won if this wasn't a shonen series where high schoolers have to come up on top. And then I would say my favorite moment with him, because that's what we're doing. I think I'll go with like Zeno's conversation with Senku, like while they were on the boat together, because even though he wasn't being a villain at this time, just having him just be himself with Senku and them figuring out the secrets of petrification, one was a nice bit of lore dump, and also two, it just kind of showed that Zeno is like not an evil character. He's like cartoonishly villainy, but he's not evil in the sense where he has like he wants world destruction or anything. He just simply seeks to make a better world for the intellectually driven, and he feels they deserve power because of how smart they are. And I can kind of see where he was coming, but like Evie said, part of the reason he's like down here on 5 is because he didn't really get the proper arc afterwards, and I don't understand. And Senku winning him over was more out of practicality in the beginning, but after that, it was kind of just more of, oh well, it's going to be too hard for you to take over the world now. Sorry, Zeno. So that was kind of his whole thing. My number 5. Then I'll go on to my next character, who I will say is Ryusui. Man, I gonna be honest, I did not like Ryusui when he was introduced. He got on my nerves so quickly, and I'm not even one of those people who usually goes on social media like clamoring about capitalism or anything. But Ryusui was like such a jerk in the beginning, where he just came in, he's established some currency, and just decided he was the boss of everybody. And while that did rub me the wrong way, I think what won me over was that eventually Ryusui, like we heard from Francois, that Ryusui's greed is to help everybody become a better person and shine. And I think we got to see more of that as the story went along. I'm not sure if that was a bit of tweaking on Inagaki's side, but the fact is, as we move on the story, we got to see how desire is such an important feature of the story, and how Ryusui plays an important thematic role in the desire for humanity being a driving force for us. Where we normally see greed as like a bad thing, Dr. Stone likes to flip a lot of this stuff on its head, like the mad scientist Senku being the protagonist, but in this case, the greedy capitalist being the driving force of our desire to do more and more and obtain everything we had and go even further. It's a very nice twist. I like twists of like good things into bad and bad things into good. It's just one of my personal preferences. And my favorite moment with him has to be when he like gave up his seat to Stanley, because I know some people felt like it was undercut based on the fact that he did end up going to space ultimately. But one, there was some setup for it because he said he was being a backup astronaut. And I would argue that the time we spent with him recognizing his own weaknesses, recognizing that Stanley needs to be the one to go, he still made the sacrifice. It's only the fact that we needed someone else to go up to the moon, or we needed someone else to go up to space to correct a problem, and he was in the position to do it, is why he had to go up to space. And honestly, even once he was in space, he wasn't even center stage. The 3 astronauts on the moon were Kohaku, Stanley, and Senku. And you could argue that even then Senku did most of the work there. So Ryusui still made a pretty big sacrifice, I would argue. He gave up a lot, and not he gave up on his own desires, which was a huge character arc for him. And I was glad to see it. And that was number 4. Then number 3, I'll have to give that one to my boy Chrome. Luke kind of talked about him a little, but yep, Chrome was at first like a very comedic character, but I think, and I've talked about this with other people, I think Manga Man Drew specifically mentioned this, or actually I think it was another YouTuber also. But basically, Chrome is an interesting character where Senku is knowledgeable about the modern world completely and almost to a natural extent. But Chrome, he's a genius practically of his time, because he's able to come up with inventions that, of course, we in the modern world already know, but he developed on his own. So that kind of showed his intellectual prowess. And we got to see a character like learn science from the ground up. And I think that's very important, because this series, as Luke mentioned with his favorite moment with Senku, is that science isn't meant just to be for the elite. This isn't like superpowers like in every other series. This is something anybody could learn. And if you have the passion for it, you can learn from it, just as we're learning from Dr. Stone. So I think Chrome was a very important, both thematically, and he had some of the best development of the series. My favorite moments kind of took, because he had some good ones. But if I had to choose, I guess I would go with when he got everyone to go with the multi-stage rocket thing, because that was like the big thing with Chrome. Is I always wondered, would he ever invent something that nobody else had thought of? And in this case, technically someone thought of this before, according to Zeno. But a multi-stage rocket built up in space is still something that was never accomplished in the modern age, apparently. And so Chrome accomplishing something, or at least helping accomplish something that's never been done before, it seems very like him. The fact that he, even more than Senku and Zeno, wanted to push further than anyone to ensure the best possible outcome, which is honestly something that usually we attribute to Senku, was so great to see. So Chrome really came into his own there, and he went out of his way to like learn from Sai and uh, improve himself to get to that point. And then number two, and honestly, she wasn't really even nearly this high until I started having all these conversations with Luke, but that would be Suika. Suika was like an unexpected character. I didn't expect to love as much as I did. Because in the beginning, it really felt like she was almost a sort of mascot for the series, outside of Senku himself, of course. Because Suika had like a watermelon on her head, and that was the whole joke. But even from the beginning, Suika had like some of the best moments from the series, from her glasses to seeing well, and of course the Suika alone, which helped like elevate her in my eyes to like at least the top 10, maybe even top 5, as Luke's saying. But then I think what won me over the most, and my favorite moment with her, was probably when she was at the very end with the time machine, as strange as this is to say, because we saw a girl who was barely able to keep up with math, like basic math, which again, she's a child, so I'm not going to hold that against her. But she got to from that point all the way to the end to helping with the time machine. And I think even more than Chrome, she was someone who, as I was rereading the series, she really hated her uselessness as she perceived, because she was barely able to see. She couldn't even stand right. But then this girl was able to get past that. She was able to do more. She was able to learn more. And when the time came, she was able to ultimately develop. She was able to ultimately develop her own set of skills and stepped up in South America. And then she teamed up with Chrome to build the multi-stage rocket. And by the end, we were seeing her with the Time Machine team, and I was just like, dang, she's recognized as one of like the world's most renowned scientists if she's working on something like this. That's just like a fact. So yeah, Suika number 2, easily my overall favorite female character. I'm also very proud of the Dr. Stone community for not doing anything strange with her after the time skip. And then finally, we have the number 1 character being Senku. Unsurprising that I have the protagonist at the top. Usually the protagonist is at the top of most of my list. But while Senku isn't my overall favorite MC of all time or anything, he's definitely up there for me in what he represents for science and the love of science. And Senku, in his motivations, was not someone who wanted to save the world because he felt he had a duty, because they could have easily written this as a story where I have a scientific duty to help humanity. But instead, they went with the route of Senku's desire to go to space, explore his own curiosity, and learn more and more. And just helping people was almost a byproduct, according to him. Now, of course, that's not completely true. He, of course, was very heavily influenced by Byakuya and Taiju and all these positive influences, unlike Zeno. And so he ended up developing a good heart and helped people. But Senku never felt like a morally righteous protagonist. He always felt like a protagonist who was doing things for practical and rational reasons, and helping people just seemed like the rational thing to do. And I like how he portrayed science both as like a positive but ultimately neutral thing, and how it was just a very intrinsic part of his nature. Senku never lauded science over other people. Like with most series, you would have a protagonist who's very full of themselves, and then you overwhelm people with their knowledge. But in Senku's case, he wanted to like teach. He taught people science. He wanted to elevate all of humanity up to this higher stage. And Luke mentioned Senku would be a great person to take charge, but Senku himself is never motivated to take charge. And I would argue that might be one of his more bigger flaws, but it's also a good part of his character that he doesn't seek power, I suppose, because that's just who Senku is. He just loves science. He's not out here to rule the world. And my favorite moment for him, that's a pretty tough one because he had a lot of them. But I guess if I had to pick one, I think, yeah, no, I know what it is. It's when he called Corn City and told his team, guys, listen, in order to save humanity, we got to destroy ourselves. Set off the petrification, freeze the entire world. That's how we're going to do it. Because, like, how many other protagonists would say, okay, in order to save the world, we got to end it? That was just such a beautiful moment. I love that part in the manga. It didn't come up with my favorites just because I think the entire Battle of Arasha just kind of culminated in that moment. So Yep, I think those are my top five. Shonoji, I think you just said you got back, so feel free.
Yeah, sorry about that. So here are my top five. For now, this isn't like the definitive list, but for now, um, number five is Ryusui for obvious reasons. I would say my favorite moment with him is like the very moment he's introduced. Because if you think about it, he's basically like what comes out of Pandora's box by petrifying Sukasa. Because Sukasa was like, we can't let this whole modern day thing happen, or all the rich people are gonna take over the world. And what's the first thing that happens when they free Sukasa is some rich guy wants to take over the world. And he's not even slick about it. He's like, ah, yes, I could take the world for my own. And they're like, oh crap, what did we do? So that's number five. Number four would be Kohaku because she's a great written character. She's a badass, and she's just the most consistently entertaining character. Like she is funny throughout the entire series, and I just love how much of a meathead she is. As far as a favorite moment with her, I'm not too sure. Although I will say, I really, really, really like the moments with her and Hyoga because I never saw that coming, but they have this weird or interesting dynamic where Hyoga learns from Kohaku. And they were both and it's interesting because Hyoga was Tsukasa's right hand man, and then Kohaku, in a way, for a while, was sort of Senku's like right hand person. So it's very interesting. Um, who did I have? So now my number three would be Dr. Zeno because for reasons you guys said, but also he's just like for me, he's like the Dio of Dr. Stone. Like he's just deliciously evil. Like he is just iconic. He's a boss and he knows it. And he's just full of style and energy. He's like it's like that meme from the Megamind movie, the difference between you and me. What does he say? Presentation? Is that what he says?
Yep, that's what he says.
Yeah, that's basically Dr. Zeno in a nutshell. The difference between you and me is presentation. My number
Yeah, I think the
two,
exact quote is the difference between a villain and a supervillain is presentation. I love that
there
one.
we go. Yes, that's what he says. You're absolutely right. Number two would be Byakuya because he's basically just like a more, I guess I would say, human Senku. Not that Senku isn't human or vulnerable, but he's more like he's a more relatable Senku. Like he's funny. He's like a college professor. He's goofy. He sucks at swimming, or excuse me, he sucks at clothed swimming, which is hard for anybody. But still, he's not like some freaking like mathlete with ripped muscles. He's just like a normal dude, and he's friendly, and he's like the kind of guy you would get a beer with. Um, I already mentioned the one from the reboot, so hmm, I I guess it's the moment where um, Senku has like the goodbye, like he goes to his grave, but from the flip side, where Byakuya is like giving him like the pep talk, and he's like, "Look, I did everything I can. It's on you now." It just really reflects how cool Byakuya is because he sacrificed everything for the world and for science, but specifically for Senku. Like he gave up his dream of being an astronaut. He gave up his whole life and he basically like just stopped everything to set Senku up for success. And then my number one favorite character is Senku because he's a great character. He is a great protagonist, but a flawed protagonist. And I think he embodies like the perfect iteration of like shonen optimism, which ties back to what I said about Byakuya's line about like picking the right or picking the best option and like making it the right move. That's what Senku does. He doesn't care about like how likely is it necessarily, like how hard it is. If it's something he wants to do and he thinks it's going to help everyone and he thinks there's at least some chance it can be done, he's going to do it. And that's why Senku is my number one favorite character, and also he's just hilarious. He's just hilarious from chapter 1 to chapter 232.
Okay. So I guess on this point we can really just talk about some of the moments that we felt were not the best when it comes to Dr. Stone. So I don't know if you guys had any preferences that you wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, I actually anticipated this topic too, but maybe we should go through some of the comments because we had a couple.
Oh
while we were.
yeah. So we had so
I think
we
last thing
had
I read was Evie's comment on Xeno, so you can
yeah.
start with that.
So we have Hayes. Yes, I love Kaku. At Annie. Ami.
MF Writer, I think.
Yeah, it highlights saving everyone no matter what. Yeah, it is. Suika best girl. Yeah, yes she is alongside Kaku. Hayes, I've got to go. I've got to go, yo. I'll definitely come back and rewatch. But my top 5 is Tsukasa, Suika, Senku, Sino, and Kaku. Good choices. Yeah, and take care of yourself, man. Sinu is quite a very well written character, I think. Rona. Sinu is a Saturday morning cartoon. Evil Sight is written seriously. Yeah, that's the hilarious thing about Sinu is that he is just so cartoonishly evil, but portrayed so seriously that you can't help but laugh at some of the things that he does, especially his elegant catchphrase, as he would say. Yeah.
But just like Emma, the writer said, he's also a character you can still take very seriously. So it's a very good balance. And
Yeah.
also, guys, for all the comments, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for all the comments. So, Party Drums, if you had any of the negatives to say about Dr. Stone.
Yeah. So yeah, like I figured we would talk about some positives and negatives because as hardcore Dr. Stone fans, of course, we're going to have our own nitpicks. And the thing is, I've mentioned a couple of them already. So I think I want to start off with the fact that although Luke did mention in the beginning, a lot of the characters in the story all have purpose and distinguishability, and that is very true for most of the cast. There's still a lot of characters that very much I felt got side shafted. Like specifically, I would think that two groups that were particularly hurt were the Americans as well as the villagers. Because if you go back to like the very, like I think it was chapter 17 or 19 or something,
It
but
was
whenever
17.
Oh, okay. I think you already know what I'm going to say. Basically,
Yeah.
when Senku first gets to the village, there's like a whole like list of just all the villagers, and they're named. And at the end of that chapter, there was like a family tree of some kind. So like Inagaki had like a whole plan set out. It seems like for these villagers to be used, but ultimately, I don't know if that was an editorial decision or maybe he changed his mind, or maybe he just likes naming all the characters without doing anything with them. But a lot of those villagers really just became nobody. Like even they were background characters for like the first two arcs, but then after that they weren't even that much. I felt like the character that got it worst was probably Rory because she was a big focal point of the first arc, Ishigami Village arc. But then she had some roles to play in Stone Wars, but then after that she was just extremely in the background. Like Inagaki at least gave her some bit of a role, so I'll give credit where credit's due, but it is rather unfortunate. But the Americans, I think, had it the absolute worst because there were so many characters like Leonard and Charlotte and Maya who had these such distinguished designs and personalities. And it made me think, okay, wait, what happened here? Because I feel like that we were going to do more with them. When we were chasing Senku and the others, and it's part of the reason South America kind of ranks like second rather than first, I thought we were going to spend time with them, to get to know Stanley's unit, but we really didn't. We really didn't spend much, even after they got free from petrification. They just were other characters that were just now newly recruited into the Kingdom of Science. And I think that's very unfortunate because all of those guys had such great like characterization, I think, put into them, but for some reason didn't get realized. So it's like one of the, and that kind of feeds into my next point, which is pacing. The Dr. Stone pacing, I think, was like the big running joke, even in your videos, OG, where it's like the one thing a lot of us fans were kind of getting worried about, like from the second half of like 2021 up to the very end, where everything was getting very streamlined. And because of that, a lot of character moments were going out the window. like not even just for the new characters we met, like with Stanley and everybody, but also the Treasure Island characters like Mozen, Kirasame, Matsukaze. They barely got much time, but yeah, I think those are like my big things. And then I think I already talked about some of the villain reformation stuff a little earlier. So yeah, I think those are my big issues I had with the series as a whole and a grand scope of things.
Yeah, and I would agree on that front, especially for the Ishigami village people. I think that I personally think the person that got it the worst, besides the Americans, was Soyuz, because you see him in that one panel where everyone's being introduced, and then you don't reference him until, oh wait, yeah, we need this guy to be important now. And it's amazing. I'll give Inagaki credit for the fact that, oh yeah, he was nameless back then, and that was the foreshadowing for him. But I feel like they could have done so much with him, and thankfully the anime did fix that, because you see a lot of him in the background of certain shots, like just in particularly in one of them where Senku's like, "Oh yeah, I want a divorce," and then Suika's like, "Senku got divorced." You see him there, you see him running away from the fire. So I'm glad that they've incorporated him a little bit more, so that when we do get to Treasure Island, he's not going to come completely out of nowhere. So yeah, I would agree that the villagers did kind of get a little bit of sidelined as well. Particularly Shovel. I like Shovel as a character, and I really wish they'd done more. They had done more with her, but also as well the fact that it seemed that Chalk and Sagare, the dog and the pig, kind of dropped off the face of the earth. Like you see them reunite with Suika, and then you don't see them again for the rest of the series. And that was one of the disappointing things that I felt about the end chapter, is that we couldn't at least get a panel that showed like Suika at their graves, because it's implied at that point that they're probably dead, which is a shame that we didn't get much more with them, considering what they did during that 7 years while Suika was in South America. But I feel the main annoyance for me as well was the pacing, particularly the globe-trotting portion of the series, and that's probably my least favorite part of the series, just for the fact that it seemed that Inagaki was so dead set on it. Like, I want it to just be 5 years, that he kind of dropped the ball when it came to the other cities going around setting them up. And there were so many other cities that he could have come up with. Like, we had for some reason Africa was the only continent that they never visited throughout the
Well, minus
series.
Antarctica.
There's nothing in Antarctica. Like, there's
I know,
nothing.
I'm just saying.
I know, but like the ones that you can actually go and visit, like with South America, you could have easily gone there to get more diamonds and like create diamond. I was coming up with the idea of Diamond City. And also as well, like I really want, like they teased us with Europe, like, oh, we're gonna go to Barcelona, so we might go to Spain, France, England, and we didn't go there, and we didn't go to China as well, or New Zealand. Like, there was so many different locations they could have gone to, and we never actually got to them. And then to compensate for it, we had in Australia, we had Ukio and Yo talking about that. Oh yeah, we went on this little adventure to this island in Australia, and I was there like, yeah, that would have been great to actually see, guys. So hopefully, when the anime gets those points, they might get fleshed out a little bit more. But also as well, there was one plot point that we never got resolution for, and I think you guys probably know what it is. It's the mysterious light at the end of South America. We never got any confirmation about what that actually was.
I just assumed we might have just misinterpreted that panel.
We probably did. Hello, I'm Rex from the Discord. Oh, hi Rex, nice for you to join us. But yeah, I don't know why, because it does seem like that was a bit strange that Inagaki would put that in, because that was after the second that was like hours after the petrification. So, like, what was that light? That's the, I think, the
Might have
one
just been the sunset
what
as far design at this point.
What? What were you saying?
Oh, I was saying it might just be the sunset at this point.
It might have just been the sunset at that point, but it was kind of weird. But no, it couldn't have been the sunset because it was actually dark. It was actually dark in that panel.
Then maybe just a reflection from moonlight, alluding to Wyman or something.
Maybe. But yeah, those are my gripes with the series. So I don't know if OG has some gripes he wants to mention at this point.
I would say the most unforgivable, unredeemable sin of Dr. Stone is that we never met the Beaver Warriors.
Yeah, that
Good
is true.
times.
I honestly thought you were going to say the most unforgivable thing about Dr. Stone is that your waifu Turquoise never got a prominent role.
That is facts. Without, I'm trying to keep it clean. I'm not trying to cuss, but that is facts. Like, Turquoise should have been queen of the. She should have been like the leader of NATO. She should have been like queen of the European Union. She should have been like the president. But no, she ain't get anything. And I am pissed. I am royally pissed. Seriously though, I feel like you guys hit all of my concerns with Dr. Stone. I guess one thing I will point to, and it's not something I actually found myself, it's something that some other people I was discussing chapters with pointed out to me. So, do you remember in Treasure Island when Abara gave Kirasame a decoy Medusa to toss?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you remember what it looked like or what it looked like it was made out of?
No, it's actually been a little while. I still haven't
Okay.
getting to my reread.
So it is clearly, if you go back to the chapter, it's I actually don't remember off the top of my head.
What
But
chapter is it?
I don't remember off the top of my head. It might be like 140 something. I my brain is saying 143. I don't know if that's right. But
No, it
it's
won't be.
yeah, you're right. You're right. But it's when Kirasame throws the decoy. Um, so if you look, it's clearly see through, like it's transparent. And the weird thing about that is that that raises some weird questions about how they would get their hands on that. Because if you could think about that, right? Ishigami Village didn't know how to make glass. So if Treasure Island knew how to make glass, that's a little weird. Like, it's not like completely impossible, but at the same time, it's like, how did they know? But they didn't. And even if it's like a gem and they crafted the gem, it's like, even that seems a little iffy. So, not like a plot hole at all, but it's definitely confusing. One, how they would craft something with that material, like that's transparent, and two, these people made another good point. Um, why Abara made a decoy? Now, the obvious answer is, well, he's Abara. He's like the most paranoid person on the planet, so he probably thought someone's going to figure this stuff out, so I'll make a decoy in case I ever need it. But I think we can infer now, with what we know, that the Medusas probably like spoke to him.
Yeah, and also I've just sent the panel to Party Jam. So yeah, I'm looking at the panel now, and yeah, it is see through. So yeah, that is kind of weird.
Yeah, for people who want to know, like I'm on chapter 126, I think, or sorry, 127. I think Luke got this from 126, probably.
Yeah. Also, Rex sending you Rex sending you a comment. OG, are you happy about the Ray cameo? I know you're a Ray believer, Sean and OG. Yeah. So, are you happy with the Ray cameo at the end of the series?
Oh, He had to go for a quick second.
Oh, okay.
We'll
All
get
right.
back to you, Rex, on that.
Yeah.
Okay, but that is an interesting point. Yeah, I don't know what this is made of, honestly, but I would imagine maybe some shell material. They're a seashell kind of society, which I also really like in Doctor Stone. How like every civilization has like their own thing. So they might have made it from some kind of shell or like rock making, but it is a lot of craft work. They didn't really go into like what is the fake Medusa, so that is something I
Yeah.
never. So that's a good thing to bring up,
Uh,
OG. You
that's
did.
a good thing to bring up. So
But
I get.
I did, oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, well, I'm sure you have other topics in mind, Luke. But one thing I thought we could talk about, if it wasn't on your list, considering everything we're saying right now, we could talk about some of our theories we had, like what it came true and what didn't. Probably what didn't,
Yeah,
because
I was thinking of what our favorite adventures in the series were that were cooked up. But yeah, we could do that.
oh yeah,
Like
sure.
our theories, we can talk about that. So if you want to go
But
first, if you
well,
go
first,
first, because
so
I'll be right back in a couple of seconds.
yeah, no problem, Luke. Yeah, I can take it. Show Noji, just so you know, while we were gone, mentioned a comment Rex made about the Ray cameo. He just wanted to know how you felt about it.
Yeah, sorry I had to step up. By the way,
Oh yeah, no problem. Man.
I I thought I liked it because it still wasn't like contradicting. Like it was still like, oh well, this wasn't going to happen, but maybe in another timeline. Um,
Yeah,
I thought it was just nice that they gave Ray a shout out. Like it was like, hey, sorry, I've been kind of kind of mean to your favorite story. Here's a crumb of Ray in the main story. I was like, you know what? I will take it gladly.
I like the project manga interpretation of it, where I don't know if you happened to catch the last one for the last Doctor Stone chapter, but like basically they talked about how all these alternate timelines are probably going to exist because of the time machine, and because of the reboot is a separate timeline. This might have just been a timeline that happened after the time machine was established. And that's just how I'm headcanonizing it for now because it fits too well. And they specifically put Ray there. They didn't even have to do that. So the fact that they did makes me think, huh, okay, this is how I'm interpreting this story from now on.
Yeah, the one thing I do like about the time travel is it now kind of like is a happy middle ground for people who didn't want reboot to be canon and people who did, because now you can be like, oh well, like you can take Inagaki's words literally. It's a what if timeline, because that's what he always used to call it at first. He used to call it a what if timeline. At least that's what he said, English translation in the volume. And I
Yep.
think now that makes perfect sense because it's like, yeah, this is another timeline. Is it like the canon timeline that we have followed? No. But this could be canon for another timeline. And I really like that about the time travel because now it's like everyone can be happy. Like I can be happy that like I can say to myself, you know what? It has zero plot relevance to the main story, but I can pretend it like actually happened just in another timeline.
Yep. And I think it's also great for fans because they can just make their own stories. And in a weird way, you can just kind of semi canonize everything with time travel because everything's just a separate timeline. Because we have a multiverse now. Also, Rex, he said maybe the reason why Byakuya was so sure Senku would break out was because of the time machine and someone telling him. That's an interesting thought because, like, the weird thing is Senku did mention saving people prior to their passing. And so, in a weird way, maybe like Byakuya's last surprise right before he closed his eyes was seeing Senku bringing him back.
Oh my
That
god,
is
can
well
you
be.
imagine? That'd be
Mhm.
crazy.
I mean,
Um, Go
you
ahead.
probably didn't see our last stream, but one of the things I thought about is one mystery that quote unquote didn't get solved, but I've head canonized this answer is the what happened to the Russian astronauts when they went off on the boat by themselves. I honestly thought we would see a whole other civilization established, but now I can be like, oh, Senku just went back in time and saved them. That's why they never came back.
That is awesome. I am going to make that my headcanon because that is just way too cool. Um, One thing I want to point out, I know we kind of ended it, but another thing I would like to point out about my least favorite moments is this is reboot and this is the main story. Byakuya seeing the ISS when he dies. I think it was needlessly confusing, and I think it was a needless red herring because I don't think Inagaki ever intended the reboot to be canon, and I don't know why he did that because the likely explanation at this point is he kind of just like saw it because he was old and he was dying, and so he was like delirious. But like it's so inconspicuous that it almost doesn't warrant that. Like it's like the nature of like how it's placed, right? Because if there was like a whole panel where he sees the ISS, it'd be like, oh, he's seeing like his second home before he dies, and he's like looking back on when he was really, really happy. But the way he sees it is like in the corner of his eye, just looking up at the night sky. And you can make the argument, oh, well, that's his idea of space. Like he really likes space. And when you look up at space, you don't see the ISS like up close. You see it like maybe like off in the distance. But I don't know. I thought it was needlessly misleading.
Yeah, and it got really more confusing with the anime having like their own like the space satellite breaking down, which just adds to the confusion. So yeah, I will.
Yeah.
That is a fair point to bring up.
I
Rex
hope.
is. Oh,
No, go ahead.
okay. I was just going to read Rex's comment. I mean, it could have just been a cameo from Boichi since he's the one drawing it. Maybe Inagaki had nothing to do with it. Could be.
It could be, yeah. But at the same time, though, like they're identical. Like they're nearly identical. If you take that spread, I believe it's a spread from the main story, and then you take the one from Reboot, they are like pretty much identical. So to me, I was like, okay, this looks pretty important, and then I found out, oh wait, it's not important at all. Um, but I'm
I mean,
not
I
too
guess
mad
another way you
about it.
can think of it is since they're so similar but different, it might just be the way to confirm these alternate timelines. Because, like,
That is true.
a lot of times, alternate timelines is like there's a thing that exists here but not there. So the parallels exist for that reason.
Yeah, theories abound. I will say though, I hope in the anime they do something to address that, like when they show Byakuya's death, because if they show the ISS in space when he dies, a lot of people are going to be confused. They're going to be like, wait, we saw it crash. So why did he just say
Well,
it?
some people will be. I have like some of my good friends who also like Dr. Stone. They don't have the best memories when it comes to this stuff. So they
Yeah,
mention.
that's true.
I
Yeah, but
guess.
yeah, Luke, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. I guess the way they could get around it is if in the anime, when he's looking at the ISS, he's seeing it move. He's seeing it move closer to the Earth, and then he just sees it breaking apart. So I guess that's the only way they could possibly get around that.
That would make sense. I would like that.
Yeah. But yeah.
So, yeah, we didn't start
was-
talking about inventions or theories. So
No,
yeah,
I wanted to
undo.
just talk about my theories that I wish had happened. I think
Yes.
you both know which one I'm gonna pick. Like the one that I'd hoped that had happened, but didn't actually happen, and it's Chrome and Suika going into space. I feel like that. I feel like that was the fact that Inagaki drew that panel of them in space, like just floating around. That was just like a big tease for me of like maybe they will actually go into space. Maybe they will. Maybe they will. And the fact that we had Ryusui in one capsule by himself made me think like, oh, there's going to be more people that are going to come up. And the fact that they didn't, and the reason why I feel like that's that is the theory that just hurts the most is the fact that it's Chrome and Suika and it's their spaceship, it's their space rocket that they decide, and the fact that they don't even get to go in it, that's a bit of a disappointing. Now, I can looking back on it, I can understand why they didn't go in it, but at the same time, I feel like they should have done because they were not only they were not only two of the scientists, but also two of like the most up and coming prodigies of Senku, and to not have them two side by side with him in space, and being part of the main cast. That's the thing that annoyed me the most about the final arc, is the fact that you had only about half of the main cast in space, and like the when we're talking like main cast, like Senku, Kaku, Chrome, Suika, Genryu, those guys, and the fact that half of them didn't even get to go into space, that to me just felt like it would be like if in One Piece, if like um the Straw Hats, like it was Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and then Jinbei are the only ones that go into Laugh Tale, and the others are just on the Thousand Sunny outside the island. That's kind of the feeling I got from that.
And I guess just to add on to that, I think another weird thing for that particular point is that when we were deciding the astronaut candidates, like with Tsukasa, he was like leading, but he still gave up his seat to Kohaku, gave his reasoning, and also kind of concluded his character arc with it. And of course, I mentioned the Ryusui moment was like one of my favorites for his character for the pilot role. But when it came to the scientists, like Suika and Chrome didn't even put up a fight. They were just like, of course, the best scientist is going to be Senku, which is very weird when you think about the way Senku phrased the original trip to the moon, where he's like, okay, so we're going to send up, we're going to need a pilot, and it was just Bruce who says, oh, that's going to be me, and then a fighter, which they of course alluded to be with Tsukasa, and then when he said the best scientist at the time, and the weird thing is, it's like almost the one that was kept the most vague, but it still just ended up being Senku, like without any debate whatsoever.
Yeah.
Kind of strange
Also,
when we think about all the speculation we were having with the astronauts.
yeah. Also to comment on Rex's comment, I wanted Senku to get petrified and for him to be revived years later, seeing that humanity has gone back to the way it used to be, and basically everyone's revived that were able to. That would have been interesting, but I don't think it would have been as spectacular as just the of just like the image of Senku in that sphere with the Y Men.
Yeah, that was a great image. I love that.
Yeah. So
Okay, so did you have more?
yeah, I had more. I just had one other thing that I wanted to say in regards to the time machine, is that I was talking to a mate of mine who I did the one when the live action One Piece cast were announced. We did a stream together, so I was talking about him about the ending of Doctor Stone, and he was kind of underground because he felt like the time machine aspect came out of nowhere, and we're having that debate, and it's like, and I said to him, well, it was kind of foreshadowed, and then I had to bring up the panel of like, did Senku travel back in time? And on that note, he was like, oh, okay, I understand, but he didn't really like that. He felt like the ending with the time machine was a bit underwhelming because it seemed to have come completely out of nowhere. But I would argue it didn't. It didn't in a sense, because I feel like this was kind of the perfect way to end the story with something that didn't exist yet, and it's only something that we can speculate on. But that was just my opinion, and it was kind of hinted at that this was kind of going to happen, because Inagaki said in a video that Senku eventually would create something that had not been invented yet, and this is probably what he was referring to.
Yeah, and I agree that Time Machine, with just the innumerable possibilities it brings, is like a great way to end the series. And I was already talking about Shonoji, but I guess the only other thing to add to that would be, I will understand how people probably saw it come out of nowhere if they didn't understand all the mechanics they were explaining of the time machine at the end, which is like one of the reasons I found it a little strange for the ending choice, just because it's like you're bringing in quantum physics for a lot of people who probably never read quantum physics. I'm like the one exception to that rule. So that was thing number one. And then thing number two is that, with the time machine, like weirdly enough, what I've learned with time travel is, despite how prevalent it is in our pop culture, time machines and time travel, a lot of people still don't understand a lot about time travel conceptually. So it's very interesting.
Yeah,
But I would agree with you that it was a good ending.
yeah. This is the point that you brought up. It's the whole, let's create a time machine and then try to undo everything that happened. He thinks that that's going to take away from the from the whole series being pointless at that point because of all the friendships they've made and meaningful character development getting undone if they use time travel. But I don't think it does because the way it seems to be implying for me is that from the last chapter is that they're only going to bring back people that are close to death. So sort of like Byakuya and all the astronauts, like after they've died and are dead and buried, they're probably going to bring them back with the Medusa. That's what I was taking away from the final chapter.
Yep, same here. Yep. So, did you have more theories you want to go over?
No, not. No, I didn't. I didn't really at that point.
Okay, well then, if you don't mind, Shonoji, I'd like to go next because I did have one big one in mind, which
No,
I
go
think
right ahead.
Luke probably knows what it is because I brought it up a couple of times in our discussion. But to give people a little bit of context, so like I mentioned, this Stanley chasing arc, as I like to call it, between the North America and South America arc, was kind of like a weird part of the story for me. But I also thought, okay, this is kind of awkward right now, but it's probably all building up to something, and it did with the Battle of Arasha. But the other thing I thought it was building up was the introduction of a new character, Chelsea. Now,
Oh yeah, I know which one. I know. As soon as he was thinking about it, it's like, yeah, he's going to mention this.
yep. So Chelsea felt like a strange introduction into the cast. Number one, she came in the Halloween chapter of that year, and so it was all spooky and creepy and such. And I thought, that's interesting. And honest, a lot of this I got from Just King, but it seemed like a lot of foreshadowing that Chelsea was going to be a much bigger deal and even a potential twist antagonist that we would have to deal with near the end. And part of the reason I was thinking that, besides the Halloween foreshadowing we were having in the beginning, is because even her origin story felt very speculative, because she was like, yeah, I was at the same place as Zeno was, but I was half blind and went the wrong direction. Somehow survived through post petrification world half blind just by navigating through geography knowledge, and survived by getting all the resources and food I needed. And then she just happened to be exactly where our crew was going to stop by just to get fuel. And I just thought, okay, this is just the most weird list of convenient events ever. Because she just felt out of nowhere, and she was playing a role too in the story of giving everybody like these resources. And of course, Inagaki was pushing this character very hard. So I was thinking, okay, you want us to really like this character immediately. You want us to understand what she's capable of. And you also just kind of want to accept the fact that this random scientist just showed up out of nowhere. And I honestly thought everything just felt way too convenient for the sake of it. So considering all that, and I thought that she was going to be like a twist antagonist later, and I kind of read into like every little thing she ever did. But I think one of the big reasons I'm a little disappointed this didn't happen is because even if Chelsea wasn't going to be a twist antagonist, she was a character like among the Americans account as someone who didn't get enough done with her, because we got to see her, but we really didn't learn anything about her backstory, her motivations, like her drive forward. And like, it's interesting because Sai, who we met a little after Chelsea, is someone we got to learn extensively what he's about and connected to his story emotionally to one of our other characters. But Chelsea just kind of showed up and started using her geography knowledge, telling us where to get resources. So she felt like, I think I mentioned this in one of Shonoji's videos, a character for practical purposes, like a writing tool. And don't get me wrong, she's a very fun character. I like her design, I like her quips, but as a character, she felt very shallow, which wouldn't be a big problem if she wasn't kind of introduced into the central cast. Because everyone else we've met so far, they were having so much character development and reveals. And meanwhile, Chelsea was just kind of existing. So I honestly felt like even by the end, like she just kind of showed up, gave Taiju and Yuzu a wedding present, and that was just kind of her whole big thing. She really didn't have much else to really contribute to the story other than her geography knowledge, which I thought was kind of disappointing because I wanted to get to know Chelsea more as a person, which we never did.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I do like Chelsea as a character. Is one of the reasons why she's in my top 10. But at the same time, I agree. We don't really know much about her as a person. Like, I always assumed like she came from Europe because Chelsea is a more common European name, particularly in England. So that's where I assume she came from. And being a real renowned geographer, she probably would be one of the people that would be like, "Oh yeah, something's happening. Maybe I should go over there and find out what's going on." So that's the backstory I kind of came up with for Chelsea. But also, one of my theories, like one of my fun theories that I thought was gonna play out was the whole thing with Yuzuria's headband. Like
Oh,
you know I've joked about that headband for so long, but again, it's like it's the thing with Miami's shells on her. Now I understand that that's from her petrification, so that's like permanently stuck, kind of like how Tsukasa has those like braids of the petrification in his hair. Um, there are many European names in America too. I know quite a few Chelsea's. Oh, okay, yeah. I was just saying it's from what I hear, it's more common to have Chelsea's over here for from what I'm seeing. But if there's more um, Chelsea in America, then okay, fair enough. But yeah, going back to Yusumi's headband. I just found it really odd that headband that has been stuck on her head for her entire life, and I felt like there was going to be something done with it, and also the fact that that headband got petrified itself. If you go back and look at the color spread, where we see Yuzuriya being petrified, you see the headband being petrified itself as well. And it's just like, what is going on with that headband? And nobody ever addresses it. And when it came out, like, oh, they were using radio waves from like head things that they were that people had on the head. I thought that that was going to be brought back to Yuzuria's headband, but it never did. And that's one thing. Like I'm like, really? Yeah, yeah, really? There's not going to be anything. It's just like a headband that's just permanently stuck to her head, if you know what I mean.
yeah. But the other thing I wanted to mention, Luke, is that you did mention that the headband was petrified, and yes, in certain color spreads, you see it petrified. But actually, before they wake her up in that chapter, it goes back to being like a whitish color. So there's
Oh,
not even consistency in whether or not it was petrified.
right. Yeah. Oh my word! It's like oh my god. But no, in a more serious theory that I just looked at the headband the same way I looked at Senku's weird hair. It's a cool design. Yeah, it's a cool design, but you would think that somebody would at least bring it up. Like, don't you ever take that headband off, Yuzuria? Like, how does she sleep with it? Um, but yeah, in a more serious theory that I thought was going to happen but didn't was the whole idea of a relative of Ryusui being a potential villain, like a capitalist villain, because you had all that backstory about their uncle being the head of the Nanami Corporation, and we never really got like so much as a resolution to that. And I felt like that was a bit of a disappointment of a theory that could have potentially happened but didn't turn out to happen.
All right. So, Oji, I know you've made quite a few Doctor Stone videos. Any theories you were disappointed didn't pan out?
I've made a couple here or there. One thing I will like to say is, are we sure it was the uncle that ran the corporation? I was under the impression it was the father.
Um,
It was a little confusing because Sai said
Yeah.
the two of them were the only ones not born of the matriarch, which makes it sound like there was like a female head. But then, that doesn't make sense in terms of the fact that we always saw a male figure giving all these orders. So
yeah,
I'm not too sure on that one.
Well, so here was my interpretation of that moment. And I say interpretation because absent any official statements, like anyone's free to read it however they want. So my interpretation was this. My immediate thought when they said that was, oh, they're illegitimate children, like they were born out of wedlock. And I kind of saw that reflected when Chelsea was like, wait, so your mom's not your mom? And then Gen had to be like, no, like put two and two together. And she was like, because like being like born out of wedlock, like not like for religious reasons, anything like that, but like it's kind of a big deal for reasons we saw. Like they were literally excluded out of family photos just because if it's true, because they weren't born to the actual mom of the family. So that was my interpretation. Um, but to lead into one of the theories that I was disappointed, Luke already said it, like a Nanami Corp um, member being a villain for the reasons he said. Um, the Nanami family, just for whatever reason, ended up being one of the most interesting aspects of Dr. Stone's world building. And we never, what we saw of it was very limited, even though, like, it's one of the most extensive families in the story, even more so than Senku's, because we get Ryusui, we get Sai, we get a look at their family, and we get Francois, and we get an understanding of like their presence in the world and the market. And it would have been really cool to see more of that and like see the other side of their family. And another thing, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone say this. I don't think I saw it on Reddit, Twitter, anything. This would have been the perfect it would have been the perfect way to cap Tsukasa's character arc, because how ironic would it have been if he originally wanted to kill the capitalists before they could come back, but then in one of the last arcs of Dr. Stone, he stops a capitalist to save science so that Senku can bring back the capitalists. And Tsukasa can be like, I'm going to put a stop to you, but not because I want to take over the world. I want to do it because there's good capitalism and there's bad capitalism. And then, like, cue Ryusui. I think that would have been awesome.
Yeah, that would make sense. I still think Tsukasa and Ryusuke had pretty good character arcs, but yeah, I think
Oh,
it
yeah,
would have
for sure.
tied theirs together really well because it always felt like there was always parallels between them, um, especially like that one part where Ryusui mentioned how he desires everybody and he understands like where Tsukasa's coming from. So they kind of had like their own moment. So it would have been nice to kind of tie up their characters, especially as I thought people have brought this up. It would have been an interesting moment where the two astronauts who gave up their seats kind of had a moment to talk. If there probably could have been more time between those two in the story.
Yeah, and also OG Rex has brought it up what you were saying, and yeah, you basically hit the nail on the head. That um Ryusui and Sai are half brothers. They had different mothers, so that's what it means. So I guess their father was a bit of a player, which would make sense for Ryusui's character, and that's probably why they were left out of the family photos.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm glad to hear I'm not just crazy. I mean, I am crazy, but I'm glad to hear that I'm not just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's in volume 24 when it's mentioned that they're half brothers, which makes sense why it was mentioned like, oh, Sai, he's half Indian. Yeah. So I guess on that front, we can if you guys had any other theories that you wanted to talk about, or we can just move on to talking about favorite inventions.
We could do that. I mean, I think I mentioned mine a bit earlier, but we can do inventions.
All right. Well, I don't think I heard them, so could you say it again, like what your favorite inventions were?
Oh yeah, sure. So part of the reason Stone Wars is like the top of my favorite arcs that we talked about earlier is because it had some of my favorite inventions. Like one of them being the cell phone. I think the cell phone, like the antibiotic, for example, I really enjoyed that just being someone in the medical field. But at the same time, I think also because I'm in the medical field, it also the uh, usability and the efficacy of whatever drug they made me go a little bit, okay, fine, I'll just accept that this works because it kind of needs to work. But moving past that, once we got to the cell phone arc, it was a nice way to show a bunch of scientific inventions coming together and like doing a bunch of almost nonsense to get like one of the most important inventions in modern times, where we had like cotton candy for the gold wires, for example, and we took beeswax and then used that as well for things. And I think with the speaker was like from these sugar crystals. And it was hilarious because it's like, this doesn't sound like it could be a real thing, but in Dr. Stone, everything's like a real thing, and people have tested some of this stuff, like the manganese batteries. I've seen some people show off that as well. So the cell phone's up there, especially with the way it was used to not just show a really cool communication warfare in Stone Wars, but also to ultimately communicate with even Y-Men for the first time. So there's that. And then we had, of course, the tank. And I mean, that was just my way of saying for everyone to get excited about Stone Wars because we're going to start building tanks. But even just the way they simply took something like paper and then they just got from there to carbon fibers to just a whole tank, which we only used one time, was just really fun. And I'm also glad how it was used because originally it was going to be used to free Chrome, but then they were like, "Nah, we're just going to send this against Tsukasa's army now," which was just a great way to do the final battle. And then aside from, of course, those early inventions we had there, I guess the computer would be another pretty big one, just because again, it's like a computer. I think it was an invention which we probably could have spent more time on, but I think at that point we had most of the components we needed anyway, so probably didn't need to spend much time on electronics. But I did like how they incorporated this ancient, or not ancient, I should say, historical Japanese computer processing system as our basis. It was a nice bit of history put into our computer, as well as like Luke said, it got great moments like with Magma realizing the importance of technology. Sai, who is like in my top 10 characters, and his use came with the computer as well and his programming knowledge. So the computer, I think, was a great like final major invention. I mean, if you don't count the rocket itself, of course, but I feel like the rocket's kind of a gimme as like a big top invention.
Yeah, I yeah, I agree. And also, Rex has just said what one of my favorite inventions were. So yeah, I guess I'll start with, I'd say my one of my favorite inventions was glass and just like the building of it. Not just because of not just because of it being like a major component of them. As Seiko says, like they needed glass for all those experiments that they were going to be doing because with the sulfur drug and sulfur acid, but also of how well it incorporated into the character development of not just Suika but also Kazuki as well, and it also has a little bit of personal history of me because where after that chapter came out and just before the anime was airing, um or it might have been no, it was after the anime. Yeah, 2019. It was after the anime had started airing. I went on holiday, holiday, and they had a glass blowing area where I was going. So I was like, oh great, I get to try this out, and it was pretty much spot on what they showed in Doctor Stone of the process of how to make glass. Like they had the whole sands and everything that were grind down. And the guy who was instructing me, he basically said pretty much similarly to what Chrome said in Doctor Stone. Like I was just a natural when it came to it. So that was something that really resonated with me. And I'm looking at the glass that I actually made from from the glass blowing on holiday. So that's why that will always have a special place in my heart. But also, I would say the camera as well for Miami that was made as well because it showcased to us to us as viewers of like, oh, Senku, even though people view Senku as like their hero, it's not just him. Like he has heroes himself, and it went all back to the photo of like what's going to be the first photo of the Stone World, and it's that very famous photo of Albert Einstein, but done as Senku. So that was another invention that really stood out for me. And of course, one of the big ones being the original Perseus, just because we like the cell phone, we spent an entire arc on it of just like, okay, we know where this arc's going, we're building the boat, and just that reveal of the original Perseus at the end of Age of Exploration, that image as well, just resonates with you so much. And of course, as well, one of the other ones, Senku bringing back electricity, and just that whole black and white panel of Senku and Chrome in the manga. if I was going to pick that one favorite panel from any manga ever, it would be that one when Senku's just like brightening up the night sky for the first time in 3,700 years.
All right. Shonoji, you have some thoughts?
So Luke stole mine. I was gonna say the Perseus.
Sorry.
No, by all means. I will give a shout out to the camera because one, it has all the fond memories. It's from one of my low key favorite arcs, which is the uh, Age of Exploration, and it basically makes Minami's character because before that, like she was the one who found Ryusui, and they do make her a little more relevant in the anime, like so far, but it was the one thing that like elevated her character for me.
Interesting.
Mm.
Because I don't think she's a character that also got to do as much as I was expecting. But unfortunately, I feel like that's true for quite a few of like the female cast members, except for like Suika, Yuzuriha, and Kohaku.
Yeah.
Nikki at least got some time being the leader of America. That was nice. I like that for her.
Yeah. Oh, and that reminds me. That reminds me of something. What happened to the record, the Linium record?
Oh yeah. So I mean, the last time I remember being played was when Senku was playing it with Zeno on their way to South America. So we definitely had it in South America. Now after that, it's just kind of a matter of did it just stay with this stuff? Did Suika keep it safe? Because I don't know after the second petrification what happened to it.
Yeah, you'd think that there would be at least a mention of it, of like of them just playing the song at Taiju and Yuzuri's wedding.
Yeah, that would have been beautiful. And also would have been like, see, Nikki, I kept my promise. And also it would have been like Lillian's like last preserved song. That would have like just sold for so much money.
Yeah. Do you think Mayamiya and Tsukasa would get together? I could see that. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, the weird thing is there was a lot of established ships outside the main ones that didn't really happen. Kind of like Minami and Tsukasa, as well as Kinro and Kirasame. That was like a quick mention of one.
Yeah,
Weird.
that was weird. You'd think that would have been followed up on.
Yeah, did for some reason. But I mean, as the big ones got cleared and Senku stayed single, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah. And I feel like one of the ones that I would be all right with happening would not Sinu and Stanley, because it's obvious that they are together. Ryusui and Francois.
Oh yeah, and then I think there was there's one other one I was trying to
There
think
was
of.
Kinro and Kirasame. I don't know if you guys said that.
We
I did
did.
say that one.
Okay, so you did say that.
Oh yeah, Homeron Hyoga. That's what I was forgetting.
Yes. Also, did you see? I think it's in the volume extra for volume either 25 or whatever the last one is, 26. Did you see why she like fell in love with Hyoga? It's so like mundane.
I think they said they just met each other at like a competition or something, and she
Yeah,
respected him.
they were at like an athletic competition. I don't think it was the Olympics, but it was like an athletic competition. And she was like, he's really cool and he's really good and he's very serious. And yeah, I was like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, I would commit arson for that.
Yeah.
It is hilarious how loyal she was to him, but then she like does next to nothing afterwards, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. Rex did actually bring up a good point. Francos was shown to be an adult when Ryusui was a kid. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Was Francois the one holding him as a baby inside his flashback? Don't remember.
No. That was not Francois.
Okay.
But yeah, that does make sense. The age gap's probably too weird.
Yeah, the age gap is probably weird. Probably more weird than people shipping Yo and Suika just because of that one scene.
I don't know who's doing that or just making that up because there's no way anyone shipping
I,
Suiko with it.
I'm just making that up because it seems that Yo is the only one aside from Senku, and Kaku to make a big deal about Suika growing up.
Oh, actually, thanks for bringing that up because I know again we moved past the stuff that we didn't really like the series, but it is kind of weird that we never got that whole okay guys we just all died. Does anyone want to talk about that? And Suika, you were just been in isolation for like 5 years or something like that. Are you okay? She was just straight up just talking to herself and using the stone statues as like companions like for like several years. Like no one really checked in on her after that. It is actually kind of a problem.
Yeah,
The
that
one,
is.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go. Yeah.
Okay. The one thing I will say, and I'm on board with you because I did I mentioned it in a video, I'm pretty sure. But I will say to that effect, it was kind of reflected in the fact that if you look at their appearances from that moment forward, not so much Suika, but definitely Gen and Sanku, like they just perpetually had bags in their eyes. And I think it kind of showed that like they were tired, they've been through a lot, and they just weren't sleeping at all.
I never noticed that.
If you
Yeah,
go
I
I,
never
back, like
noticed
I
from
that.
noticed
that
it
point
when
on, Senku just like always has bags under his eyes.
Hmm.
oh.
I never noticed that.
I mean, I did notice that, like in one of the extras, I think they said that Gen was doing some basically free therapy for everybody, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna headcanon that he took care of all this off screen. But yeah, that is
Well,
actually something I would have liked to see.
One thing that came up, so Inagaki did, I believe it was with his wife, maybe because
Yeah,
his
his
wife has
wife
a YouTube
did an interview.
channel. Okay, so yeah, it was with his wife. One of the questions, I think it was about like why Senku didn't end up with anyone, or like something about him and Gen. And Inagaki ended up saying like, "Well, it's a good thing Gen was there for like it wasn't. I don't think it meant to be like sexual in any way, but or romantic in any way. But he said something along the line of like nighttime talks. So I believe what he hinted at was that like at night when everyone would like rest and sort of settle down, Gen would sort of like check in on everyone and like be like, "Hey, what's going on? Are you good? Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah, and I mean, I do like that role for Gen, and we do see at least a little bit of it with him talking with Sai. But I did kind of wish we had some time spent on just kind of them talking about South America because, like, right afterwards, they just kind of made friends with the Americans after all that.
yeah, yeah. Um, also, Rex, did you guys notice that the Medusa that stayed with them got a little rope? So I guess it's part of Ishigami Village now.
Yeah, I
Did
saw
it?
that trivia pointed that out. It
That
was
is the
really cute.
coolest thing ever. I did not even think of that because I remember thinking like, "Wait, did it have the rope?" And I thought like maybe because they threw it, like I remember like Kohaku threw it, so I don't know.
Oh yeah,
I never looked back, so I didn't know if that was like there originally. But that reading
Yeah,
of it, like
look
why
at
the
the
rope
color
stayed,
page.
that is the coolest thing ever, and that is my head headcanon now. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah.
Yep, that was in a touch. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Rex. Okay, so Luke, did you have other topics to discuss?
Um, I guess the only other topic I had, unless you had any other topics, was what the future of the series is going to be moving forward, like with the Ryusui chat with the chapter um in front of the Ryusui special, and what the future of the anime may bring.
Okay. Um. Okay. Interesting question. So I think that one thing is I hope that we get official English translations of the light novels because they exist and we don't have them officially. And I would like to have that because it sounds like a lot of what the light novels, at least from what I've heard, has would address like a lot of our concerns about we didn't get to spend time with the characters in certain ways during like the slowdown of like the in between moments that we got in the early stories, but not in the later parts. So I'm hoping that comes out because I would like to have more of Doctor Stone content in general. And then, of course, with the anime, I'm I hope that the series will get like a full adaptation. I don't see why it wouldn't, but because the whole story is there, and I think the story just progressively gets better up until maybe arguably around the end where it gets a little rushed. But even then, it's still quality. So I'm hoping that even though the manga's over, the hype and excitement for Doctor Stone doesn't end. But that's hard to say because it's a lot easier when you have weekly content. Because when you don't have content for a while, people tend to forget. Because I swear, like even last year, when people were ranking their top animes, some people just forgot Doctor Stone came out at the beginning of 2021, which is
Ye-
unfortunate because Stone Wars was great.
Yeah, and going back to what you were just saying, Dan, um, you've got some people who are thinking that Doctor Stone may do a Promise Neverland, which good good lord, please do not let that happen. Please do not let that happen. Um, but yeah, some people are saying like, oh, we might just get season 3 being a big marathon series, which it would have to be like 48 episodes to do the entire series if that was the case.
Mm, yeah, and I don't, and I mean, I feel like next season will just cover up until like like you were saying with 138 with Treasure Island, maybe with the whole we're gonna go to the moon, or maybe a little bit after,
Yeah,
and then
I would.
for probably be most of America, if not all of it, plus South America, and then I don't know if the globe trotting will be included completely in season 4, or if they'll just use that for another season. Because if they
Yeah,
use it for another season, they could have like a whole like filler stuff right there.
yeah, which would be really good to have. Like just expanding on some things that Inagaki didn't get a chance to do. But here's the way I always envisioned it. It's like end of season 3 is like, okay, we've just revived Sukasa, and we've announced that we're going to America. And then the beginning of season 4 might actually be a recap episode because you have Mai Amiya doing all those interviews. So it might be a recap episode, just based around the kind of the same thing of what they did in the beginning of season 2 with Gen recapping everything. But this would actually fit because it's actually incorporated into the series itself. And then I would say whole of season 4 would go up until the end of South America with the whole on that day everyone on Earth turned to stone, but this time they knew that they would return, and then it ends with Seiko saying, "Time to start counting again." So that's my vision of season 4 going about.
Okay, that makes sense. And then with the Ryusui special, it kind of begs the question: is are we going to get more spin-offs down the line? Because I know Boichi once said he was thinking of a Francois uh, story spin-off, and I think we would all be happy with that. Because again, I
Yeah,
think now that we know the size in the picture as well, they could do a whole lot with just the Nanami family. Because as OG pointed out earlier, they're kind of weirdly a fleshed out part of Doctor Stone's lore, which we could probably use even more of. So that would be nice. But I don't know. Like I know Shonen OG, you mentioned like a spinoff you had with like Stanley and Yo having their own like buddy cop kind of thing. But I wonder what other spinoffs we could possibly have.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that if it was so like not serious, but if that did happen, that would be hilarious because it would just be like immaculate. Just a 9 chapter volume about Stanley and Yo like solving a post Medusa uh, threat to the globe would be hilarious.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, and also as well, I would like to see more from like if Boichi decided like, hey, I want to see what Joel and everyone's doing in Corn City, do like a 9 chapter spin-off of just the misadventures of Joel, and they just try to interact with everyone in Corn City.
And they could also, of course, give us more time with Suika being by yourself, South America.
Yeah,
That would
definitely.
be pretty nice. even like Senku's time by himself, they could always explore more. Because I was always kind of a little upset because in Tsukasa's like speech with Senku, when the freezer scene that Shonoji brought up earlier, they kind of talk about the time when he, Taiju, and Senku were all together and just having like their own little survival meetup. And I'm like, man, I wish we spent more time with just Senku and Taiju and even Tsukasa when they were doing their stuff because it just seems like simpler times. We could have just reflected on a lot of where their characters were at the time.
Yeah. Um, well, here's the thing about the special chapter. We don't know if it will actually involve Ryusui. I mean, we assume that it might be because it's coming right before the special, but it could just be it. For all we know, it could be like Ryusui finally gets the head of the Nanami Corporation back or something like that.
Could be. We really don't know what's the up with the OVA because it's very interesting. It's coming before the season 3 of the anime, where Ryusui gets, well, not revealed. I guess we saw a statue, but he doesn't get revived yet. So it's interesting they want to like kind of introduce the character or at least some aspect about him beforehand. So I don't know what that's going to be about.
Mm. Unless it's like an hour-long special.
Well, yeah, we don't even know that, do we?
No, no.
I'm pretty excited to see what that is. So let's see. And but honestly, I don't feel like this is a series that's going to get like a major sequel or anything because I think like with the time machine, it kind of shows us that at this point any sort of sequel would feel very forced on us because there's nowhere to really go except theoretical science from here on out. So unless they want to start going into space and traveling with aliens or something, or show us like how time paradoxes are getting resolved, it there's really nowhere else for the series to go.
Yeah, yeah. Also, just want to quickly comment on Rex's comments. Gen was basically a therapist on the side. Yes, he was, and he would be very capable of that. I think season 3 would go to the end of chapter 141. Yeah, pretty much what I'm suggesting. I hope they had the Ryusui special chapter to volume 26 at the end of it. Yeah, I feel like it might just be like a post epilogue chapter. We just never know. And the special should at least be 48 minutes. Yeah, I agree with that. Because then you can like introduce like, okay, this is like what the boat's gonna look like, and then it could probably just end with it'll be hilarious if it ends if it's like called the Reusui special, but it Reusui's only in it for like for like the last 3 minutes or something like that.
Yep, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what that's about because we really don't
Yeah.
know much about it. They're being weirdly tight-lipped about it, despite announcing it. So yeah, I don't know what else there is to say with the future of Doctor Stone, unless you had more there, Luke, OG,
I
Peter.
yeah, I had nothing else to say. So if OG has something he wants to comment on.
I will say this. So I think Doctor Stone has 3 more seasons. I think it's going. Season 3 will be Age of Exploration and Treasure Island. I think season 4 will be both of the Americas. I haven't done the math for that. Um, I don't know. I think both of those are like 20 to 30 chapters. So depending on how long that is. But I think, like, just logically, that would make the most sense to
I
start
think
with
like
North
the
America
end of
and end
Treasure
with South
Island was
America.
138, and then we left South America around 200. So
I think, yeah, that would probably work out. Maybe not 24 episodes, but something, maybe if not one core, then like a core and a half, something like that. But I think logically that makes the most sense. And then season 5 would be just everything else. That's what I see the anime doing. As far as now, I did a video on this, obviously. Like, will it end short? I don't think season 3 is going to be the last season. I think, if anything, season 4 would be the last season. Because if they ended it with like one of the biggest peaks in the series, wouldn't hate it. Would I be disappointed that they wouldn't adapt the whole story? Absolutely. But would I hate it? No. Um, Now, I don't even know how likely that is, but it's a possibility. As far as the Ryusui special, Luigi did say that he wanted to do like a cooking story with Francois. Originally, I thought that could lead into another spin-off, but time-wise, I think the most efficient way to use that idea would be have the Ryusui special be one thing, and then the special chapter be like a lead into the TV episode, but be what Boichi wanted to do, like be the Francois special. So I think that's what that's going to be. As far as another spin-off, again, Yo and Stanley would be amazing. But Inagaki also said he wouldn't mind doing one about Gen being a diplomat. I think that would be awesome. I think it would be a great way to flesh out the world building and tie up some loose ends with the characters. The only other thing I can think of, I honestly don't know. Like, there's so much you can do, but that's where I see Dr. Stone going. And Party Jams, you said it already. I don't think this is going to get a sequel at all. I don't think it's Inagaki's style. I think he likes to do stories, plan them out, wrap them up when he wants to wrap them up, and then move on to bigger, better things. Now, I will say, I don't know. Boichi, I did quote tweet it a while ago. Boichi did say he would love to do another main series in Jump. And we talked about this on Twitter. I don't think he's ever done his own series in Jump. Somebody can correct me because I know he's done a bunch of one shots.
As far as I know, no.
He's done a bunch of one shots like Origin, and then he did Sunken Rock, but I don't know what magazine that was in. But he seems to really like doing science fiction. So if I will say this to anybody who's wondering, if Boichi ever did a new science fiction series in Jump, I would jump on that before he even wrote it. Like I would be there with Space Ramen and Senku Cola ready to help him however he needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say if it's his own series, like on him, number one, it would be a fairly big deal because, as far as I know, it'd be the first time a non-Japanese author would have like a leading series in Jump. Because as far as I know, like Boichi is one of the few like foreign mangaka in general. So if he ran his own series, that'd be a pretty big deal in Shonen Jump. And two, it'd be kind of cool to see the progression of that series on YouTube as well, because he likes to put his drawings up on YouTube. And if it's his own series, we'll probably have a lot more insight. Because like when it came to Dr. Stone, as I learned from the interview Nagaki had with his wife, some things, of course, Inagaki was able to elaborate on, but other things he's like, oh yeah, well that was more Boichi than it was me. And then of course Boichi will sometimes in his video say, well, this is what Inagaki asked me to do. So there's a lot of more in the collaborative effort. A lot of things they made just kind of just came out of them just working together. So I think with like a series just helmed under him, if he decides to go that route, then he would probably have a lot more to say, which would be cool. Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if can you imagine if Boichi was the one writing Eden Zero?
Oh my god, that would be like way more.
That would
Somehow there would be more fan service.
yeah, literally. Like that maybe the angles wouldn't be as bad, but like the way the characters are drawn, like let me put it this way: there would be more like Senku giving Ruri medicine. There would be a lot more scenes like that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Eden Zero has been great. How far are you in that, Luke?
I'm still like in the single digits for the chapters, but I will be catching up on it. Don't you guys worry. It's just taking time with everything going on at the moment.
No, take your time. I was just wondering.
Yeah, but going back to what you were just saying about the collaborative effort. Yeah, because Inagaki did originally intend Stanley to look more like a character from Lupin the Third. Daisuke Jin G-Gen, basically a grumpy old man, but it was Inagaki's influence that made Stanley look flashy and pretty instead. That's on the trivia for Stanley as a character. So that's kind of it. That's kind of interesting how it was probably, and if you go and look at the interview that was translated on Twitter, it's heavily implied that it was more Boichi's idea that Stanley and Sinu were in a relationship rather than Inagaki's.
Say
That
that
was
first
also
part again. Sorry to cut you off. Say that first part again. What were you saying about Stanley's design or his character?
He was originally meant to be based on Daisuke G-Gen from Lupin the Third. So basically, a grumpy old man.
Yeah, because I remember when Boichi was doing like a design video of his on YouTube, he said, I specifically remember him saying, I wanted to make him look like a really good looking man. And I remember being like, well, mission accomplished, friend, because that is the prettiest man I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, the trivia got it from that video.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, Stanley is like the prettiest guy you would ever come across. Like, remember when he was first introduced and we all thought he was a woman?
Yeah. I mean, I thought, yes, we're getting an awesome female antagonist.
Yeah. And then it's like, oh, that guy's name is Stanley Snyder.
Yep. But Stanley was great.
Oh yeah, he definitely is. Really wish they'd done more with him though.
Same. Definitely could have done more with his backstory. And honestly, that's kind of why I include him with Zeno as an antagonist. Because by himself, he's a fine antagonist, but we didn't really go into him as much as we did with Zeno and Tsukasa. Anyway, the one other thing I wanted to mention, because I did anticipate we'd probably talk about this idea of more Dr. Stone content, is I would like if Inagaki at some point decided, you know what, I'm going to just write out the 100 tales and just like give it out to you guys.
Oh yeah, because we only know like about 4 of them, do we?
Yeah, something like that. We know like the one with the bee. We know, of course, it number 100 with Senku. There was the Momotaro one. And there was probably some other ones we learned, but like only a handful. And like there was, I think, one with platinum. But there's like 100 of these. We only know like a handful.
Yeah, and for all we know, there could be subsections of that, so like 99.5.
Yeah, so I would like it if we got that either in like a light novel or
actually
goes online and gives it out. I don't know.
I just wanna look at that on the wiki. So like the 100 tales, because I believe there were some that were in the that were revealed in the extra volumes. So yeah, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's like 9 tales on the wiki itself.
Yeah, but that's still like less than 10%.
Yeah.
Interesting though. I hope we get that. So I did have like one last topic I wanted to bring up, but Luke, if you had more, or Shoutenoji, if you had more, feel free to bring them up.
I didn't really have any more topics, so I guess unless OG has any more he wants to bring up before we get into the final topic.
Now I'm all ears.
Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is kind of one of the reasons I was like really hoping Doctor Stone would be like a smash hit series, which that's a very debatable argument of whether or not it counts as one, is the fact that a lot of like the really big series out there, like the big three, for example, like they go on to inspire so many more manga after them to kind of use their stories and motifs as like a baseline. And sometimes people will use it, of course, as a negative, but realistically, people are inspired by stories. That's just how it works. So the writing process works. But with Dr. Stone, there's a lot of things it did both with like the shonen formula and of its own unique volition, that I was hoping that maybe more series could use down the line. I kind of just wanted to talk about some of those unique attributes of the series that I think would make it a good series that I hope other people take inspiration from. And since this is my random topic, I'll start off with what I mean to kind of give some examples. I think one of the biggest things are the roadmaps that we have in Dr. Stone. Because I think with a lot of series, especially as I'm starting to read manga more from the beginning onward, I noticed a lot of them have like, especially newer mangaka, have structural issues where I don't know if the mangaka themselves know exactly where the story's going or how they want to tell the story, or if they know what story they want to tell and just had like a basic idea and they're just kind of going off it and winging it. But the roadmaps in Dr. Stone, I think, were like a great way to kind of just show the readers upfront, look, here are the inventions we're going to do. Here's how we're going to get there. And each of these inventions are going to be a big deal, like in and of themselves, and they're going to culminate into the future inventions as well, as we saw like with the giant series roadmap down the line. Now, of course, in Dr. Stone, they found a way to naturally include it because we're creating stuff, so they have to show all the steps. But I feel like that same idea can be incorporated in other series where it's like, okay, guys, this is a list of all the stuff we're going to do, and just kind of show it out with cool illustrations to give the readers an idea of, okay, this is where we're going. Because I think that will give readers more confidence that, okay, this is a story that has structure and I can follow it. And it's not just going to be like a basic like villain of the week or whatever the author comes up with that day. Like as we talk with Witch Watch, sometimes they just come up with random things to talk about on a weekly basis. And like another thing I enjoyed is the way they adapted the shonen formula. Because I feel like now there's a lot of shonen series that kind of stick to the formula very tightly. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The shonen formula is very successful for a reason. And what I mean by that is there are stories that kind of start with the protagonist against an impossible goal, and then they have to go fight some great evil, either as revenge or because they have like this drive to do so. And they have training arcs and power ups, rivals, and love interests, etc., etc. But with Dr. Stone, they did a great job of taking ideas from the formula and very much twisting them. Where we start off with the protagonist who is going up against an impossible goal, but at the same time, it wasn't for like personal reasons, at least until later on. In the beginning, it was just out of his desire for science and his own desire to go into space. And then, of course, instead of power ups, we get inventions, and instead of like when we get to new locations and rivals, we have characters with like their own philosophies rather than just generic bad guys who are from like the demon world. And I like how all the antagonists felt very human and contrasted with the themes of Dr. Stone rather than just being like just a monster for the hero to take out to kind of prove themselves or something. Let's see. And then, of course, the crafting kind of took the place of the training arcs as well. So I'm hoping the more series will, after this next wave, kind of use the shonen formula. And I'm not saying those series don't exist already. Like there are other series out there like P6, which are kind of doing like a musical take on the shonen formula. And there's probably some other ones that I'm not as familiar with that are kind of making use of the formula and twisting it on its head. But I'm just hoping that more people will follow Dr. Stone's example of, okay, we don't all have to be like the same kind of story, but with just different names for all the characters in between. We can tell a unique kind of story using the same structure. And I think the last big thing I want to bring up is that like just Senku as an MC, we already all had him like in our top 5 characters, and for good reason. He's a protagonist who isn't driven by like necessarily moral convictions, nor is he like an obnoxious loudmouth, but he's very calm, he's rational, but at the same time he can also be kind of goofy. He felt very human, but at the same time he didn't feel like a goody two shoes. He had a bit of a sinister side to him. And through it all, he like never had like, oh, I'm developing feelings for some character and getting in mixed up in love triangles. He just stayed, well, he didn't really stay single, but by the end of the story, he was basically a bachelor, unless Luna's still dating him. That was never really confirmed one way or another. But I like how Senku felt like a very unique protagonist, but at the same time had those same ideas of, I need to work with others to accomplish my goals. I need to challenge myself, and I need to like, and he had not really rivalries, but had other people like Chrome and others to kind of measure up against in a way, and Zeno as well as an antagonist. So I guess Senku as an MC is another like format I hope people will follow, rather the same way people will use like Goku or Naruto, or even Ichigo as like a template. Like if people can use Senku as a template for this is the kind of like smart protagonist I can use down the line. I think that would be great to see.
Yeah, I agree. I was gonna bring up some ideas of like what other series could do with the Dot Stone formula. Like you mentioned PPP, but I would also mention Akane as well as being another one that's like doing a different take on the show on the show and trope of the whole role play acting aspect. And I feel like a series like that could really benefit from like having its own roadmaps as well. So like okay, this is the roadmap to get to this level, this level of Rokugu, and these are the steps that you have to take in order to get to this first initial stage, in order to get to the overarching goal of being a Rokugu. But not just that, like if there was like say a series that focused more on like writing or like for like there was another like Bakuman style manga that came out where it was more focused on the development side of creative writing rather than the end result, and just like all the little different tangents that you'd have to go off in order to get to the perfect formula. So like, okay, you need the protagonist. Okay, what's the protagonist going to be like? Okay, what are the different layers to this protagonist, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I really hope myself that the what other series can take away from Dr. Stone is just like how unique of a protagonist Seiko is, but also like the structural development of the series, of how it doesn't necessarily have to be like power ups all the time. It could be like, oh, we're leveling up in terms of like our ability to do writing or do acting or play the piano or stuff like that. But also, one of the things I wanted to say as well is is with the light novels. Since I mentioned PPP, because one of them was basically Kohaku, Chrome, and Suika forming a band, and I would love to see that animated.
Oh, I didn't know that. That does sound great. I hope
Yeah,
they do bring some of this stuff to the anime. Honestly,
yeah, yeah. So that was mainly what I wanted to say on just how other series could take away from Dot Stone.
OG, you got anything on this?
I think you made a really great point. I'm curious to see how structurally and mechanically Dr. Stone influences future Jump manga. The other thing is I'm curious to see like the cultural impact it has, because obviously it's not JJK, it's not AOT, it's not Chainsaw Man, but I think it's very iconic, and I think anyone who sees a reference to it will know what it is right away. So I'm curious to see like what kind of references to it we see in the future.
Yeah, me too. Because obviously the series just ended, but I think when the anime really gets more people's attention, we'll probably see more of that. Oh, and actually, speaking of which, I know we talked about the future of the anime, but I wonder if if we'll ever get like a Doctor Stone movie, if even just like the reboot, a reboot
If
adaptation.
if there's going to be any Dot Stone movie, it'll probably be the reboot or the reboot.
The
Yeah.
reboot. The only thing I'll say about that is, and spoiler alert, this is going to be the next video, is the reboot is super hard to market, and I don't think they would do a movie, only because for a bunch of stuff I'll talk about uh, this week, one thing that would make it particularly hard to market as a movie is there's really no villain. Like, So, for example, like with the My Hero movies, like you have an idea of like a villain, like there's some threat, even though that's not like the main focus necessarily. Like there's some sort of tension, like there's some sort of obstacle. There's no like clear obstacle in the reboot that they could market unless they wanted to spoil it. And even then, like it's not nearly as marketable as like having a actual villain.
Mm.
Hmm,
Okay. That's
that is a
point.
good
I'm
point.
looking forward to that video of yours, and also to anyone who is still on the stream. You guys got the exclusive reveal of the upcoming shonen
Yeah,
movie.
Yeah.
you guys will get to see me uh, crap, for lack of better words, crap on one of my favorite stories. So it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and by that I mean it will be on the internet forever.
Okay. Well, that was the last big topic I wanted to address because I thought it would just be an important thing, part of Dr. Stone's legacy. Anything else you guys got before we close off the stream?
Nope.
Nope, I've got nothing else. So I guess we can end. I guess we can end the stream there. So thank you for everyone that has joined us for this, talking about Dr. Stone for nearly 3 hours. It's been a lot of fun, and be sure to tune in on Sunday for mine and next Sunday for mine and Party Jam's regular stream, where it'll probably be a double double stream, talking about double chapters, but not really much to talk about the chapters this week. So hopefully next week's ones will be will have much more to discuss and be great to compare the chapters that came out this week. So until then, we will see you later.